Okay, welcome everyone. This is our 10th meeting. This will be the final meeting for this semester, and we'll take a summer off. For most of you, it will be off, but for some of us, we'll be working hard putting together videos about this theory, and then we'll come back to the regular group meetings starting September. Now, for this final meeting, we have 3 crazy topics to discuss. Crazy not because they are not important, crazy because the way we are going to be discussing them involves you having open mind and ability to actually understand the maybe at some point non very trivial mathematical frameworks that go into the discussions. So one type of questions we'll be discussing is medicine. We already touched that topic a bit in one of our previous meetings, but we'll dig into it a bit more. The second topic will be economics and then education. So 3 would be usually considered as unrelated topics to physics, and yet we'll be using the framework of neural networks of a learning theory, trying to answer questions within those 3 categories. Okay, so let's start with medicine. And as usual, I'll read the question that somebody posted. I'll try to give my own answer in the context of the learning theory, and then we'll go around and see what other people have, thoughts that other people have. Okay, so the first question is, can one use the multi-level learning paradigm to develop a unified theory of medicine? Now, just to bring you up to the date, what is the multi-level learning theory? It is roughly tells you that they're similar or essentially the same learning phenomena might be happening at different scales and different levels, from physical level to biological to psychological to political and all other levels. And but now we are concentrating on the theory of medicine, and so the idea that is even within the field of medicine, within the field where we are trying to fix the organisms that are not quite operating as we think they should, there are still many scales. There are many subscales, and then one may ask, well, if that is the case, can you have a unified description of different diseases and treatments and drugs on all those different scales? And so I think, again, if we take the multi-learning theory, multi-level learning paradigm as a correct paradigm, then of course the answer should be yes. And moreover, you should be able to borrow techniques that you've developed for one scale and apply them to come up with treatments or drugs on the other scales. And that kind of falls. I'll read the second question right away because it's kind of related to this. Can known medical treatments on one scale be extended to the other scale? So because I already started answering that, so let me finish it. And that's the whole point of this unification. You look at the given drug that seemed to work on one scale, and then you say, okay, well, how do we generate a treatment using the efficiency of this drug or this treatment on another scale? And these scales can again be from scale of individual cells to organs to the entire organism or anything in between. And so the answer seems to be yes, but let me see if you have any thoughts, ideas, or follow-up questions on those 2 questions. Anyone? It is usually a slow start for everyone. Everybody has to wake up, get into the talking mood, and then after that phase transition, it's impossible to stop people. People just keep talking and talking and talking. So let's see what other thoughts people have.
I have a statement.
A thought or a statement? Okay, statement. Related to the phrased questions or not?
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
How do you consistently coordinate the logical methodology between the scales?
Right. So it's a good question. So in physics, we developed a tool that's called renormalization group theory, where what it tells you that you may have a theory that is kind of the same on different energy scales, but certain things do change. So the form of the theory, the form of the Lagrangian is the same, but certain things do change. And those things that do change are just constants. They are considered at each scale, they're constant. And as you move from one scale to another scale, basically the form of the theory remains the same. So logically, it is the same framework that has to be used to derive predictions. Yet certain parameters need to be adjusted, twisted. And so developing this flow, randomization flow of how, given a theory on one scale, you generate a theory on the other scale, it just boils down to changing the parameters. Now, it works very often, but sometimes you go through the discontinuous jumps where all of the sudden a new degree of freedom appears. And then your theory is no longer the same, becomes more complicated. There's like a new field appears, a new degree of freedom, something new that you have to keep track of. And we do expect that this will be happening in the biological scales as well. And so you have to watch out. Yes, many things you can just borrow from one scale and use for the other, but there may be new phenomena that you would have to study. But the framework is always the same, right? If you write down Lagrangian or Hamiltonian and you extend it all the way. So presumably something similar can be done for medicine in a more mathematically coherent way.
I like that renormalization. I was not familiar with it. How does renormalization relate to symmetry?
Symmetry is something that you usually see at a given scale. So you have a given scale, and then at a given scale, you study the symmetries of the system. And actually, symmetries of the system hint to you what kind of degrees of freedom you have to add. So it gives you a hint. It gives you what are the, like in machine learning theory, what would be the relevant parameters that you have to pay attention to. What are the relevant degrees of freedom? And everything else is irrelevant. You just, forget it. They are not relevant on this scale. They will be relevant on, they may be relevant, become relevant on the other scales, but they're not relevant in a given scale. So symmetries play a crucial role in constructing a theory of a given scale, but then there is more to it. And now you have to flow them from one scale to another. And that's where all of the unknown magic of physics appears, because, not knowing just what theory looks on one scale tells you a bit about what it looks on the other one, but not the full picture. So you have to flow there, and then there may be new degrees of freedom period. So you might have heard that, again, we very often switch to physics, but that's okay. You might have heard that, at the high energy scales, the field theories are not good to describe the physics we live in. And so you need to complete it with something. We have UV completion. And the recent attempt that people played around for 40 years is let's complete it with strings. Let's just put strings there that only become relevant at the very, very small or high energy scales. And the idea that we're entertaining here, that maybe not the strings, but the neurons would become relevant, and then you would have to adjust your theory. But that's the idea. Okay, so let me go to the next question, unless somebody really wants to add something to the discussion of the unified theory of medicine. Look, this is as important as it gets, right? Can you imagine you discover some drug that happened to work on one scale, or treatment, and then you say, wait a minute. If it worked on that scale, it means that I have to perform certain transformation and tell you exactly what needs to be done on the other scale. And that's unification among different scales would be really powerful, even outside of medicine. So let's say you discover some phenomena on the physics scale, and then it should tell you something about how it would work on the medical, on the biological scale. Katya, go ahead.
I don't quite understand how it is practical. What does it mean? Can you give maybe some examples?
So let's say you have a drug that happens to work, and drug maybe is working at the interface between two levels: level of chemistry and level of cells. So some drug just happens to fix up the cells that are misbehaving in a certain way, right? So you know that at this scale, there is this type of coupling between levels that proved useful, right? So now we are saying, okay, if it worked on that scale, and everything is learning, then similar to a drug which is working on physics scale should appear on the on the scale of the multicellular organism, or at the level of the organs, right, where there are many cells involved. But then what would play the role of the drug? It would be something else. It would have to be maybe some cells that would be treating the multicellular subsystems. And so that's kind of pushing something discovered on one scale to another scale, taking it from the scale on the interface between chemistry and biology to the scale of the interface between, simple unicellular organism to multicellular organism. Yeah, Josh, go ahead. Maybe.
Is it possible to think of the scale as like complexity of the genome, and then you could imagine you're doing tests on very simple genomes like fruit flies, and then you move up to mice, and eventually that's kind of how medicine kind of works today. But because we're not able to model anything beyond like simple atoms we're just now being able to model like very complex atoms in chemistry. It seems like we should be able to start operating on those different scales by being able to look completely at the entire simulation of atoms. Do you agree, or do you think it's different?
Yeah, no, it is similar. Just also you're moving when you're moving to more complex systems, that is a different scale. Now, the only problem with this more complex system, it's not just one scale that is like larger time scales, but there is all scales below it are also relevant. So it's you consider a level of the human, right? And yet the levels of the individual cells are important, the level of physics is important, the levels of chemistry important, everything before this. So when you really move from just a mice to a human, you're more or less on the same level, right? So you haven't, and so it's easier to transport, the given drug that was, it's like parallel. You move it, you keep the same complexity of the system that you're trying to treat. Here, the statement is much stronger. Mm-hmm. It's really is possible to move vertically. You can move from, if you know how to treat a single cell, and if you discovered some mechanisms, essentially similar mechanisms should be present for more complexes. And you can move it up, like we don't have to stay within the biology, right? Economics, we'll be discussing economics later. So if there is a cancer-like cell within a human body, there has to be something like cancer-like, people in societies, or cancer-like subsystems of the economic societies, political systems. So similar, both diseases and drugs should appear on different scales, and that's kind of the idea of how you can push it up and down. Also, if you discover something on one scale and you haven't seen it on the other scale, go look for it, because it's better be there. Or maybe show why it isn't present there. Because as I said, example with a string theory or other RG flows, you may flow and then all of a sudden new degree of freedom appears, new phenomenon unknown before. And so you can see those things happen, but at the same time, you should expect similar phenomena appearing on different scales. Okay, Katya, did it answer more or less your question? I mean, I'm not giving you 100% answer. Yeah, yes. Brainstorming here, right? Yeah. Thanks. Okay, good. So let's move on a little bit further and ask the third question in medicine. How can we improve the safety and effectiveness of drugs and medical devices? Well, okay, so now I want to bring this point closer. So really, drugs are nothing but coupling. They should be described by a coupling between the level of a drug and the level of the organism or a system that the drug is trying to fix. So the drug can be at the level of physics or chemistry, which is usually the case, right? So it's some chemical, and then it couples to a higher level to the organism. And if we really want to understand the safety of drugs, then we really have to model this coupling between levels. It is the hardest one, actually, because when you are within one level, then again, there are tools like in physics, you write down a theory which kind of describes how the system behaves at a given scale, and all other scales are coarse-grained over, integrated out. Here, we are saying don't coarse-grain them. keep them and keep this few levels, level on which the organism is operating and a level on which drug, and model this coupling. Now, if you can model this coupling, then you can understand what would be its purpose and how is it actually helping to fix a given problem with a organism. So I would say the modeling of the coupling. So just to summarize, the modeling of the coupling between two different levels is something that's missing. Something needs to be. Once we have that, once we model that, then we can say, all right, yes, it is safe. It's a good coupling, extrapolate it and use it on all scales. Or it's a bad coupling, or it's a dangerous, or whatever it is. Any other thoughts, ideas? It's a difficult subject, right? So we're not doctors here, and yet you are trying to. But again, take your favorite area of expertise. I don't know, maybe like Louis, you're a politician, you like in the political science, or I myself, I'm a physicist, right? And try to reformulate what it means from the point of view of your field. And that actually does mean that similar phenomena should be extrapolated along different scales. And that's an important, strong statement. Other thoughts? All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so you mean you pretend to create this theory of chemistry out of, or it will be emerging from
chemistry
neural
is only
network?
one level interacting with another level. But let's say I can imagine that there are drugs that are not chemistry. They are living cells. Okay, and the living cells are of course more complex. It's harder to model that. Yet they can couple to other living cells or to the levels higher. And so this isn't just chemistry. Chemistry only operates on one scale, and the chemistry isn't enough actually. You have
chemistry is the lowest, right?
It's the lowest, exactly. So you have to have at least two levels for the modeling. And that's why, most of the drug discovery is experimental science. You just try it. Try this, try that. And that's not good because this one important level above chemistry hadn't been modeled. And if you are modeling it, then you have a better chance to actually first discover it and then see how it can be extrapolated to other scales.
But did you try, or do you plan to try to model chemistry as such out of neural networks equations like you did for gravity and for quantum physics?
We are doing exactly that right now again. So this is one of the projects that I run in the company, is we are saying, okay, you might have seen the paper about autonomous particles, right? There was one step towards it. So let's have particles that have their own loss function. They're trying to optimize their own objective, and then they drive around like autonomous vehicles. Okay, but that's not chemistry. They are not going around like molecules. So let's complicate it more. Let's modify its loss functions so it does at least take into account classical phenomena like electromagnetics. That can be done. That's not hard. And now you're saying, all right, but let's add quantum effects. Now, what would now this autonomous particles be? Or actually no longer particles, but more like collection of particles that are now collaborating, how they would be behaving in such system. And then there are two dual pictures that we discuss. One physics picture where you just write down Lagrangian, describe equations of motion for molecules. And then there is another picture, learning picture, where you do not write down Lagrangian, you write down a loss function. And now those particles are not trying to extremize the action that would happen in physics. They are trying to optimize their loss function. And then we are doing exactly that. And then the result of this would be as two simulations. One simulation is where you do honest quantum chemistry simulation, and the other simulation where you don't do that, you just do the learning theory simulations, where each particle is autonomous car, right? Or autonomous particles.
And neural network.
And you use neural network, exactly. And then you look at them and say, all right, can I adjust the loss function for one? Not one, there are many particles there, right? Because there's one that has to play the role of electron, there's nuclei, and et cetera, et cetera. And then you put them together and say, okay, well, both of them produce the same results. And then now it's just your interpretation. In one interpretation, you have like put your physicist hat on and do the usual the physicist like analysis. In the other, you put your machine learning on, and then you have completely modeled how a chemistry behaves if it was a learning theory. Okay, that's one step. The second step, now we have to do the same with biology, biological level. We also have to model them. Now it will be even more complex agents with even more complex objectives. And now we put them together and let them couple. So here we have those complicated cells that have a complicated objectives, and maybe they are modeled with a larger neural networks. And then you have chemicals that are modeled with a smaller neural network. We put them together and see what comes out. And so that would be rewriting all of the medicine in context of the learning theory only. Not all of the medicine, it's only the medicine that deals with the interface of cells and chemistry. Then there are other levels, and so you would have to do the modeling, similar modeling there as well. And of course, in every modeling, what's important is to remove everything that is not essential, coarse grain over them, and concentrate what is important. And you have to do it on every scale. And once that's done, that's modeling. And then you can effectively actually check your drugs, what they actually do ahead of time. So that would be a theory-motivated discovery of drugs, top-down rather than bottom-up, like we usually do. Let's try this, let's try that. We don't know when it works or when it doesn't work. Okay, other comments? Okay, so we've discussed how we would go about discovering drugs.
Vitaly, can you hear me?
Yes, Victor, go ahead. We can hear you, we cannot see you, but I'm sure you're there.
I'm on the street with the phone, with the non-working microphone.
Okay, good.
So I just thought about why it's difficult for me to talk about medicine. And the first thing which came in my mind, is that it's really difficult to talk about disease in our learning paradigm. So can we just start from the basic question? What is a disease, just medical disease on the single level? What is it from the perspective of learning, of neural networks?
Very good.
Can we have some classification probably of possible problems about which we can formulate in the terms of neural network and show some connection, some analogy to disease? Had you thought about this way of starting?
Very good. I think that's important. I was going to say that, but then I just forgot about it. We already mentioned it before. We related it to overfitting. And I will only talk about it in context of aging. Aging is like overfitting. But I think it applies to all misbehaving subsystems. So subsystem, you have a subsystem that doesn't behave as it should. So kind of it didn't learn well to model the environment, right? Why that happened? Because of overfitting. It was placed in some environment where it got stuck in the local minimum. And we wanted to get unstuck. We wanted to some kind of put it in a new environment where it would know that it has to raise the temperature, biological temperature, and then unlearn the misbehaving part and start. And then the medicine has to do that, has to actually say, look, you are a cell, you are not doing what you should do, start doing that. And the only way it can be done by putting the cell in the environment where it would signal to the misbehaving subsystem that it is overfitting. Otherwise, it wouldn't know. It would just, it doesn't know, the single cell doesn't know that it doesn't does any good to the multicellular organism without us giving it a sign. So I think overfitting is the closest I can think of in terms of what the disease actually is. So Victor, I don't know if I've satisfied your needs. I can also give you another example where overfitting happens easily when you have a neural network where just it doesn't have enough of the trainable parameters. It is very highly constrained. Then it gets stuck in a certain state, and then it cannot do any better. So and why it's stuck? Why is that the other 13 parameters stop changing, stop training? Well, because the system thinks it's in a good local state. So you have to take it out of its comfort zone. You have to tell no, you have to relearn it. And without a hint from the drug, it wouldn't be able to do this. And if you give it enough hints that it has to with a drug, then it should do. So that's my understanding. But of course, there may be other thoughts.
So basically, there are many several phenomena which are very different from the learning point of view, but they can be interpreted in one way or another as a disease. So it looks like they're really different. Like overfitting is difficult to different from the shallow network, or from the network which somehow lost its connections, or whose parameters became overwritten. There are many options, many problems which can arise.
Think about a shallow network. If it was originally non-shallow deep, right, and then certain connection were lost, frozen, what it means from the point of your learning theory, the system decided that those should no longer be trainable. So it's kind of constrained itself to a certain state. And that decision is a disease, but that happens because the system thinks it's fitting pretty well the environment, right? So, so we need to give it a hint. Then no. What you made yourself shallow, or shallow is probably not a good example. You put a constraints on the architecture of the neural network that worked well for whatever training task you had before, but now it isn't working anymore because the environment changed. So you've overfitted to the previous data and no longer able to adjust to the new coming data. And that is kind of, and you have to give it a hint. No. Start retraining it. Katya, you had a thought? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to refer to the, do you remember the previous discussion about dinosaurs and
yes.
butterflies?
Yes.
It was also about, you interpret it as overfitting, age. It was about aging.
Mm-hmm.
And, or not only about aging, dinosaurs, because they die out.
No, but it was also overfitting, right? Because they were being trained well. Dinosaurs were trained well to survive in the environment that they've survived in, and then the environment changed suddenly, and they were not able to adjust. So this is exactly
If you take a butterfly, it lives a few days, so the environment doesn't seem to change much during that time, but it dies anyway. So
right, but doesn't, because well, with a butterfly, it isn't really trying to optimize its own. It lives in the environment, a biosphere, right? So there are two things. You can be optimizing your own loss function, or you may be optimizing something on the higher scale. And it is a fraction of how much weight do you give to optimization of your own good versus good of the society. So maybe the butterfly dying is not helping the butterfly, this particular butterfly, but it is helping the entire ecosystem to
But then why we talk about people aging as some kind of disease or some overfitting? If it maybe, what's the difference with the butterfly?
So that's a very good point. So when we are saying diseases, we put it in quotation marks. So maybe they are good for the society, but we are just saying let's consider a conjecture that we want to optimize only a given human being. So if we have to do that, what should we do?
My objection is first about calling aging a disease, because the disease is something gets wrong. You can live some amount of time and die peacefully without.
But then something becomes wrong. You stop functioning as a learning system. So at your level, something becomes wrong with you. You are stopped functioning as a learning system. You're no longer learning well.
Okay, then what goes wrong with the butterfly?
With butterfly, nothing goes wrong. So and maybe it is just the result of this evolution where butterfly was not putting its main objective to surviving for longer, right?
But so what's the difference between a human and a butterfly in this context?
Butterfly is not thinking of how to treat itself. And we are thinking about. So medicine is all about tricking the nature, right? Medicine is saying, well, let me trick it. Let me come up with a strategy of how I can fix up the failing parts, fix it, and then, this will allow me to live longer, so I can write down more mathematical equation and maybe discover something important, right? So that kind of, at first, things like why would we want to live past 30 years old, right? Maybe everybody had done enough. But then if you think about this, that now we are at the new scale, we are trying to actually, as a community, generalize, generate new theories, write down Shakespeare books, and then evolve as a society. Maybe now it makes sense for us to live longer. I don't know if it will make sense for us to live for 1,000 years, but maybe 100 years is beneficial, more beneficial for the overall, because, like, for example, physics. You cannot really do physics in the first 30 years of your life because you haven't learned enough. Okay? And if your lifespan was 30 years only, then that's it. We would not be producing more physical theory. So, okay, so here's an argument why we should live more than 30 years. Well, maybe 1,000 is too much, but maybe this should be pushed. And when we are discovering new medicine and new drugs, a new way of treating and fixing the problems, I think that helps us to not only optimize our own good, loss function of individual organisms, but of the entire civilization. That's kind of the point, right? If the loss function is to optimize the performance of the entire civilization, then maybe it does make sense to live longer than what you would do otherwise without medicine.
There is a difficult question here. How can we understand that we are still doing something useful? Because many researchers or technological invention actually maybe will not for good. So how can we distinguish one from another, and how we can? I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
Just
so that's one of the questions we discussed the other day, and we'll also discuss today for the economic growth. What is a good? We'll get there. I'm not going to answer now, but what is a good measure of economic growth? What is it we are trying to optimize? After all, as the civilization. But let me get there. Let me finish with medicine first, and I'll get.
And sorry, still about the dinosaurs. When we talk about butterfly, we talk about one butterfly. But when we talk about dinosaurs who died out, we talk about species, not about a single organism.
Oh,
right?
but that, I think we discussed it already. This is just rephrasing the same question on a different level. That's all. So dying out butterfly or died out person is just the same phenomena as dying out species, but formulated on a different level in the paradigm. On the higher level, we are talking about species. On the intermediate level, we talk about organisms. On even lower level, we talk about cells. And those are just the same question can be formulated on all levels.
But I mean that in case of dinosaurs, the environment did change very significantly. So it's doubtfully that an organism can adapt to such. I mean, it's a different situation.
Well, some organisms adapted quite well. Most organisms actually adapted. It's only dinosaur was too big and it required a lot of food and it wasn't able to survive. So it was okay. So for most organisms, this was not a sudden change at all. It was like normal change. But dinosaurs overfitted to really be so big, and so they were not good in so I think it's kind of the same point. But let me finish with one important question on medicine, and we'll move on to economics. And I think it is very important. It's connected. Should there be the design of a holistic health system instead of medicine dealing with manifested diseases and symptoms? So I'm not sure exactly what the right health system should be, but I do think it has to be multi-level. In a way, when you're seeing that there's something wrong with a person or with a given organism that you're trying to fix, you should not be considering it as a problem on one level only. It is usually the hierarchy of levels that is wrong. And so if you're saying, let's fix it, and you're only fixing one level, then you may not actually fixing the core of the problem. And that's why the complexity of developing this theory of medicine unified is to include all levels. And when I was answering the question to Alexander, we're starting from bottom up, but you have to create a model of everything. We started with the modeling, mathematical modeling of how chemistry behaves as a learning system. The next step will be how the single cellular argument behaves as a learning system. But we have to move all the way, and then we'll see how this entire system can collapse and what can cause it to collapse. And then you once we have that model, then we will have a symptoms of that model, and we can compare with the symptoms of mathematical model, and compare with the symptoms of real people, and then tests for the real people, so that we know exactly what went wrong and what is the easiest way to fix it. Alexander, go ahead.
Yeah, I finally finished reading your article about the world as a neural network. And the question on one of the last sentences is that about natural selection. It's a principle of natural selection. So the question is, who is the subject or object of the natural selection in this case? Is it a neural network architecture, as you mentioned? So it's a selection between architectures?
Right. So we are trying different architectures, right? Dinosaurs versus, I don't know, monkeys. And then one of the architectures survives better than the other. And then there's always this fight between different architectures. But it happens on all levels again. We can only talk about competition on the level of species, or competition at the level of organisms, competition at the level of cells, physics, chemistry, and so on. And so it's always this selection. The ones that are better in modeling the environment are better in surviving the environment, and so they move on. So basically, that's the idea.
And by architecture, you basically mean the number of levels, right? What else?
Oh, no, it's more than that. The entire spectrum. So architecture is actually the weight matrix. You can always model it as a neural network. So it's a weight matrix, and it's actually the spectrum of this matrix which is most important. I claim maybe more than that. So because they can have two. There is a problem in mathematics. Given same two spectra, will you produce the same geometry? Like, can you hear the shape of a drum, whatever, in physics and mathematics? So here it is not geometry, but a neural network. So potentially, yes, you can have two networks that have the same spectra, and then one is better than the other. However, I haven't been able to show that there is more than spectrum that is necessary. So my claim is the spectrum is probably most important.
And spectrum also defines the number of levels.
Oh, it defines the number of levels, selectivity, everything. So it has all that information and more. So it's a lot more information that yes, absolutely.
And what is the one more on this? If in biological natural selection there is selective pressure, what was the term, right? So in the environment that shapes the natural selection. Right, some factors. What is in the case of very low level chemical elements or atoms? What is the pressure?
Well, there's still the environment, right? So you have molecules, and then you have surrounding molecules, and you have to optimize your state so that you survive for longer. Now, some stable particles and there's some unstable particles. The stable particle, they're stable exactly because of the environment. The environment is not destroying them, and so that's kind of goes all the way from physics to biology and beyond.
So basically, any interaction serves as the pressure, selective pressure.
Interaction with the environment, yes. Any environment, any interactions giving you that pressure, absolutely, yes. And then you shape this in a way, yeah. Gary, go ahead.
Very powerful idea. How much of physics is now controlled by the paradigm of neural networks?
It may or may not. We are just entertaining one idea when we take a neural network and say, let's model everything with a neural network. Maybe not. Maybe we'll discover a phenomenon.
That's my question. How popular is this notion? I like it a lot.
Oh, popular. Okay. Well,
in physics, how popular is the idea of neural networks?
Let me tell you that 95% of theoretical physicists think that string theory is the right way to go. And that's would be a popular vote right there. Now, is this objective code?
Trace theory, what's trace theory?
No, string theory.
String theory.
String theory, yeah.
Is string theory a neural network?
No, they're two different things. I'm just saying the most popular standard approach to physics is a string theory. Now, neural network theory is a recent idea. It breaks all the rules of how things should be constructed. Again, we're moving off from medicine, but okay, I'll answer that question. So you're just changing the framework. In one framework, you have strings. You write down list action principle, you calculate your scattering amplitudes, you produce particles, then you look at the fields and you follow all the usual paradigm, how you derive the low energy phenomena we observe. Now, unfortunately, the string theory cannot take you all the way to biology, and it terminates right at, at the high energy physics. And even there are problems of how generating it. Now, here we take an objective, very bold approach where we say, okay, well, what if it's not string theory, but what if the neurons, microscopic neural networks that operate everything? Well, it's easier said than done. Now you have to derive everything. Now you have to derive all the physics.
What percent of physicists will be using this thought?
Yeah, you can ask different physicists and they'll take you the vote. Every physicist I talk to is interested in this idea, but I think this is not the place where I can give you those numbers.
It's too new. It's too new.
It's too new, exactly. Yeah, it's too new. Okay, so let's move to economics, and that will wake up Louis, absolutely, because it's closer to him. Yes, Louis, you are still here. The questions of economics. Yes, he is here, of course.
Yeah, I've been here. Yes.
Nice to see.
Well, no, medicine is also interesting. It's all interesting, definitely.
Right. Okay, so economics and then education. So we'll have fun today, all the way it's a last meeting for this semester, and so it will be fun. Okay, so economics, the 5 questions. The first one is, what is the impact of globalization on economies and societies, and how can we manage its effects? Again, I mean, I'm not certainly expert in that, but let me tell you that unrestricted globalization, where you just say, let's connect everyone to everyone, is certainly not the way to go. From the point of view of the spectrum of the neural network, this would look terrible, where every node is connected to every node and produces like small perturbations in one place will affect and break everything. So unrestricted globalization, I'm certainly against it. But the neural network certainly should be global. So it makes no sense to have isolated subnetworks with very weak interactions. So there has to be globalization, but it has to be in a scale invariant way, meaning that not everybody is connected to everyone, but yet there are all possible connections. All connections are possible. Now, how do we actually monitor a given economical system and see, well, it's good or bad from the point of view of the neural network theory? Well, the first thing we have to do is to take and model it through the network of connections, like in a social media, who is a friend of a friend, who is interacting with whom, whose decision, who is paying attention to. And once we model it, we can take this neural network, we can run a test on its spectra and its performance and say, yes, it has the right spectrum, it has all possible scales appearing there. There is some scale invariance that I would expect would appear, and it's good. And the other is good. And the other is bad. So globalization, I think it's good, but unrestricted, unconstrained is very dangerous and very bad. At least that's my view. What are your thoughts? Luis, are you against globalization or not? All right.
I think what the way you've described it, I think is acceptable. I think good question. It's difficult for me to find a way to put my thoughts into clear, concise sentences. Mm-hmm. I suppose, like I said, what you've said makes a lot of sense. There needs to be globalization. But I think the key is, how do you balance, right, the collectivism with individualism, right?
That is the key point, and I think we should not just say choose one or the other. but we should model the network of connections. Basically, that's important. Connections or decision making. Like, Louis, you are talking to me, so part of your decisions depend on what I say. Now I'm talking to you, part of my decision depend on what you say. So we have established a connection. It's a non-local because you are in, where are you?
Barcelona.
I'm in Florida. All right, so there we go. Non-local connection is established. Okay, so and we have to model all such connections, and it's not hard. It's not hard, and then once this thing is modeled, we can look at its spectrum. We can see how it evolves, and we can make a predictions. Now, is the system in a dangerous state that it's just about to go phase transition, or it's in a good state, it's evolving very well? Can we improve its performance by promoting certain type of connections and punishing others? And so all those things can be done. But again, and that's kind of takes me to the next question. So how can we understand and predict the behavior of financial markets here, or prevent financial crises? So the point is that you can model the social system as a network, and then you can kind of see when the system is about to undergo a phase transition. And so you can have some kind of early warning system. The system is about to undergo phase transition, do such and such with its spectra. Again, don't base your decision based on that person, based on that person. So kind of recommendational system that you can get. And then you would soften the phase transition. Say phase transition would still be there. Okay, it's impossible not to have them, and they're good actually, but you should soften them. So make sure that they are not destructive and they're not producing anything that would destroy the whole organization. Because if that happens, then the temperature goes up, and the system will take some time to cool down and stabilize a new minimum. So that's kind of the thing. All right. Now, I also state here there are two types of phase transitions for any learning system. There are two types. The one type is the learning system in itself just develops a clever way of modeling the environment, right? It realizes there are some new features that it didn't see before in the environment. And that is internal phase transition. It's a very good phase transition. It's a phase transition that makes the system be a better learner. And then there is and you can model it too. Yeah, it may. And then the second one is due to the environment, as we already discussed. With when the environment suddenly changes, the system has to readjust to it, and that's the second type of phase transitions, and may be more catastrophic because the system is just not. Doesn't know how to deal with this new state, new environment. And so in both cases, I think those phase transitions should be modeled. If the system can be modeled as a neural network, then you can model when the phase transition are about to change, and you can have early warning signals that they're just about to happen, and then you can soften them. And so that's kind of an important thing to do. And then you would still have some kind of crises and some phase transition, but they will be softer, if that's what we want. Other ideas or questions about economics?
Can I say my thoughts about this?
Of course, Victor. Always.
I have generally two thoughts about all this talk about economics. The first is rather optimistic. I think that learning theory is very well suitable for to describe an economy. It's as a language, probably as a formalism. It is really good, and I can reformulate many things from economics in this way. Talk about prices, information. So it's easy. The difficult thing comes when you start talking about we model. For the general, from the economics point of view, it's a heresy because you cannot model this system. There are no aggregates. It's the only way to model it is just to duplicate it. The only way to understand what is going on is to have a model which is exact copy of economic system. Each agent, each economic agent, when you start thinking about real economy, each economic agent has his own freedom. And we do not have any way to see any aggregates, any global parameters to describe this system at a degree at which it can be useful. You have some quasi outer stationary stationary states where you can make a predictive engine and can predict prices in a stable situation. But the problem is that as a network is a learning system, it learns very fast and it has very fast reaction times. And so your existing model just loses all connection with the reality when some very small adjustments really propagate through this system. So it can be a good language, but as a practical tool, I do not see any advantages over existing tools. And trying to understand, probably you know that stock market is analyzed by neural networks for more years than even before the current artificial intelligence revolution. Neural networks were the people were trying, people based trading strategies on them. They were successful just to the moment the next crisis started and all their models come into the waste bin.
Okay, Victor, I think you said two contradictory statements. One is the learning theory is useful, and the other, the learning theory is useless. Okay, let's just figure out which one is correct. So let me now try to first defend it, and then tell you why. Defend your first statement, and then defend your second. Why? When can it be useful? Well, it can only be useful, this complex system, when the mathematical analysis of a complex system is useful. If only if you can coarse grain over irrelevant information, and the remaining relevant information is sufficient to describe the system to sufficiently long time scales. And now, in physics, we call such theories renormalizable. You can really coarse grain over irrelevant stuff, and there is a handful of relevant parameters, relevant invariants, like I call it. Now, if that's possible, then the system is predictable. Now, yes, if we want to extend the time scale of predictability, then you have to put more and more of those relevant parameters. So basically, your neural network model has to become bigger and bigger. Now, at some point, you may say, well, the number of relevant parameters becomes infinite, and then everything is relevant, and so it's impossible to do. Maybe, but we wouldn't know until we try, until we really try to identify the relevant parameters, model it, and see what kind of predictions it makes. Now, in physics, we do it all the time, right? So we have gazillions of molecules that are very complex, and simulating them on the computer would be a disaster. And you don't do that. You come up with a mean field limit. You kind of coarse grain over irrelevant information and keep the relevant information. So it's a possibility. Now, when can that not work? Well, that's maybe if the system is non-renormalizable, if it is the system such that all of the small perturbations, as you said, decision of a single person of any single person, not like some subset of people, but decision of every single person can completely change the predictability. There is this butterfly effect. We are mentioning butterfly again on a different context. Now, then we've just discovered that we cannot really predict on a long time. So like weather forecast, right? You can only predict it for so long, and then you cannot predict it further. Until you do this modeling, and until you do this modeling, and then you identify what is the relevant and irrelevant parameter. And only once you did that, you can know for sure. Victor, we can hear that you are talking to somebody.
Sorry.
Yes. So yes and no. I don't think that just saying we tried to model it with the neural networks and it didn't work, so that therefore it's a proof that neural networks do not describe it. It's incorrect. Only given neural networks, given that you identified the relevant parameters correctly, only then you can claim that this didn't work. So without the identification of relevant parameters, we do not know for sure. And again, it's all up to the time scale. So maybe we're not interested in predicting how economic system develops on the scales of 100 years, but at least, 10 years would be good enough approximately to see how things behave. But again, this is, we wouldn't know until we try.
No, but I agree with this time frame argument, but many of us, I think even here, had seen the situation when, yes, you can probably, our neural networks can model a situation for the next day or next couple of days, but some of us experienced and will just wake up at some moment and you see that prices change dramatically overnight, and it is really stable this time frame for which you can be really sure. Yes, it is different, very different in different times, and
okay, let me just add one more thing, Victor, just came up to my mind. So let's say we cannot model it with a neural network theory. That is also an interesting result. Then it says that everything below that scale we could, and above we couldn't. Below it was renormalizable, above it's not renormalizable. That would be a spectacular result that just shows when this borderline is.
I'm not. We cannot. Here depends on on who are we, with what capabilities can or cannot we
we
do
have the most expensive computer and like all of the money in the world, billions and billions of dollars, and we say, okay, model it.
This question can really be applied to any of the topics we discussed. For this limit exists for medicine, for cosmology, and for economy.
Absolutely.
And so this is the very, very general question for which, and we have to we need some tool to compare the complexity of the network at some level, at some subsystem, with the available tools, available complexity of models, and available computational tools.
So I think we just should do the best we can with the resources that we have. And I think it applies to any system, whether it's a weather forecast, stock market, or strongly coupled system, whatever it is. You just have some resources that can handle, let's say, 10 relevant invariants. So you work with it, and everything else you say, I'm coarse graining it. Yes, the more resources you have, the better you will be able to model. And at some point your model will just break down. Yes, but you will still have to do the best you can with the resources you have. Katya, go ahead.
How can you predict the phase transition? What are the factors? How you understand that the system is in a critical state?
Yes. So the power law distribution of fluctuations. So near critical point, all of their fluctuations are possible. We have small, large, and larger and larger, and all of them are their larger fluctuations are still more suppressed, but they're not suppressed exponentially. They're suppressed by the power law. And so once you see that happening, you say, aha, we're about to go through the phase transition, so watch out. Okay, let me read the next question. Now, what is the relationship between environmental sustainability and economic growth, and how can we balance the two? Well, I think it's a difficult question, but I think it would be nice if we as a civilization defined a loss function for us, one on which we all can agree. How important it is to have economic growth, and how important it is to actually have the environment that is not destroyed by the economic growth. How much resources should we allocate to preserve the environment, or maybe help it, and how much resources we should allocate it to the growth. And there is a balance between, we can put too much resources into the economic growth and then destroy environment completely, and that will be horrible on the longer time scales. Okay, it will be good on the short time scales, but horrible on the long time scales. Or other way around, we can just put all of our efforts into the environment, forget about the growth, and then yes, it will be not bad in a long time scales, but you will not be advancing as a civilization fast enough. So we have to put the balance, and I think it has to be in the definition of the loss function of what is it we are trying to optimize, and that has to be kind of our joint decision. For now, it was mostly people are making their own decisions based, well, I want to make more money or whatever they have. Josh, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, because you're touching on a topic that I think this comes up a lot, this idea of individualism versus collectivism. And what I've noticed is that it's really learning theory and neural nets are one of the few, if any, kind of way to make sense of that, because it seems like in the world we live in is really a digital world. Well, the world that we pretend we live in is this digital world of zeros and ones, right? So we're either Republican or Democrat. We're either capitalist.
Speak for yourself. I live in the analog world.
Right, exactly. But when you think about actually what learning theory tells you is the answer is rarely the 0 or the 1. It's somewhere in between, and it's our task to figure out where in between the 0 and the 1s. And what I think in like the old digital view of the world, it's either 0 or 1. We're all kind of battling to figure out which one's better. But in the learning view of the world, there's going to be a spectrum between the 0s and the 1s, and we need to learn together as a group, as a network, where in that spectrum is best, because we agree it's somewhere in there, but we really need to do some experiments to see where it is. And right now, society doesn't realize that. We haven't woken up and realized, like, hey, we can experiment with the spectrum. I don't have to be a 0 or 1. I can think about this as a learning opportunity and figure out where in this spectrum gives the best results. But humans don't do that very well, because we have issues with cognitive dissonance where it can cause pain. But if humans got better at doing that, if we trained ourselves to do that better, I think we'd have a lot more results, and we'd be able to move towards this sort of unified view of things.
That's beautiful. I like that. Analog people all the way. Yes. Gary, go ahead.
I have created 3 words for this: selfish, otherish, and we-ish. So you don't want to be selfish. You don't want to be otherish, where people are taking advantage of you. You want to look at that sweet spot where it's not a zero-sum game, but you can actually operate in a civilized way, that there's a coordination. So I try to teach weism.
Right, I agree. That's all related, and I think this is very good. Yeah. Okay. Let me move on to the next question. How can we exit the growth economy trap, not falling to the new dark age and poverty due to the collapse of the economic system, but also not having faced the biosphere collapse caused by the growth economy? Okay, long sentence, and Alexander already has something to add. Let me just answer that quickly, and Alexander will be. So I don't see any problems with growth economy. Actually, I'm supporting the growth economy, but I don't like the growth economy where the objective is to create wealth. And we discussed it last time. The main objective should not be wealth, and should be ideas. And anything we can do, create new ideas, new theories, new products, new understanding, whatever it is this is what I'm for. And I think it's a growth, because you cannot create products and they're correlated, certainly. It is certainly true that ideas produce wealth, but it's not other way around. And they're very correlated, especially in the market economy, right? But nevertheless, I think the concentration should be mostly on ideas, theories, not on the wealth. Alexander, go ahead. You have something to say about this.
Yeah, Gary just reminded me about games, right? Is there a place for games theory within your network? When
I think
networks
game theory,
interact.
So I think game theory is good, but neural network theory is a broader, in a sense that it can describe the games, zero-sum games or whatever games, but it can model more than that, and it also gives you a more particular, more precise framework. So I think it is better in this case. And I do know that game theory was used a lot, for example, in biology, and yet I think what we have with the learning theory is richer in terms of mathematical structures we can form, the spectral analysis, and I'm sure that every game can be formulated in terms of the neural network, but not the other way around.
So it's broader, yeah. It
Broader, yeah, more general.
Yeah,
Okay,
I actually remember learning that all games could be drawn as a network. So
right, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so anyways, coming back to the how to not to fall in the growth economy trap, I think once we change our objective to ideas, and then once we formulate the loss function that isn't just one or the other, and a balance between environment and the growth, then we can achieve the more stable and more efficient system that can. Now, however, that also takes me to the last question in economics, is like, how can we promote economic growth and development, and what are the factors that contribute to economic success? And I'm absolutely sure there is only one factor, a main factor that contributes to the economic growth and development, and that's education. So this is the key factor. The better your educational system is, the more educated people you produce, the better those people would be generating ideas, finding common grounds, and making the system, economic system, evolve. So I would say that the key factor is education. And once you have education, you can generate new ideas. And once you have education, you can not only generate those ideas, also implement it. Create a products that would benefit, everyone, and including the whole biosphere. Let's be broad. Any questions, comments, ideas about economics?
Are we still on economics, or have we?
We are
switched
still
to
in
education?
economics.
Okay. I would only add one comment, observation, and I'm still trying to get a better feel for. I wish I had attended from the beginning. I'm having trouble connecting to the language that's being used and understanding how to bring it down to a practical level. So I'm still feeling that disconnect. I'm hopeful, confident that I'll be able to eventually connect it, but for example, when it comes to economics, what specifically are the implications of thinking of the world as a neural network? What specifically, concretely, are the implications for economic theory and some of the biggest open questions in economics?
So Louis, I think it's always modeling. It's always modeling. There is nothing we can do in this world but model. And if you have a mathematical framework that allows you to model something using very simple rules, neural network is a very simple rule, yet it allows you to model complex phenomena. And if that's the case, that is the only use of it, modeling. So then you say, okay, I want to model it. I want to model it as a neural network, but then I have to specify certain things. One thing, I have to specify the architecture of the neural network. Okay, and that's where we come to from theory to practice. You go ahead and say, okay, I'm modeling the society. I'm modeling my family. Okay, the smallest society there is. Okay, and then I create a few nodes. I create connections and look whether the spectrum of this small matrix makes sense from the point of view of the neural network theory. Or maybe the connections within my family are not optimal, and it has to be, for example, if it was a very shallow family, there is one boss and everybody just listens to that boss. This is a very shallow network. Now you can move on from the family to local communities. Again, if there's one person who makes all the decision and everybody else is just listens to that person, this is very ineffective economic system. This wouldn't work. Okay. Now this is very shallow. Now you can say, well, let's create something very deep, or like something like everything is connected to everything. Also not a good idea. And so just by modeling the network of connections and bringing it in and putting it in the language of the neural network already tells you something about the efficiency of your system. And then you have to model the environment around this neural network that is changing it. And then you have to model other things. But again, The only good thing about any mathematical framework is the ability to model, nothing else. Gary, go ahead.
One of the things that helped me with this question is to begin to understand that a neural network is really not based on the historical logic of mathematics, but is a data science. You use the term learning. So it's all about the practicality. You hypothesize, but it's all about it's a scientific process. You hypothesize, then you experience, you experiment, and you begin to get some data that allows you to take some action in that context. So you're going from the history of geometry and the mathematical structure and the numbering structure that's been created from that, and you're transcending that, and you're being driven by what the data actually says to you. The current data says to you, I'm in Massachusetts. If we surveyed people in Massachusetts, we get a whole different mindset than surveying people in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since I'm operating in Massachusetts, it's not the theory of the mathematical logic, it's the data feedback. And this is where I think it fits directly into economics, because economics is about understanding the behavior of the local environment that you're operating in.
Yeah, I agree, but it's not just economics. Any science is about data.
I agree.
Yeah, physics, chemistry, cosmology, it's all about data and model.
I agree.
Okay. So collect as much data as you can, filter relevant, irrelevant information that you think, and then model it. That's it. That's all of the science.
As relevant.
Yeah, and because if you keep all of the information, it's impossible to model. Now, if you already filtered, then it's already possible. You are in the business, then you model it, and you can make a prediction. And then yes, your network in Florida, my network in Florida would look different than your network in Massachusetts. And I'm not saying that mine is better than yours. We just run a spectral analysis of one and the other and figure out, well, for that environment, maybe this one better, for that environment, that one better. But we can make a suggestions of what to change. So one immediate suggestion will always be having autocratic regime is a no-go.
Right. As you do that, you can begin to prioritize which of the factors have the greatest influence on the intended objective.
Yeah, the relevant information. You understand what is relevant for this structure and what is irrelevant. And then your political network need not be the same as your scientific network, and because it's solving a different task, trying to optimize for something else, and that's okay. And all those networks can be modeled. And that's all we can do. And that's what science is all about. Katya, go ahead.
So neural network is really a general purpose idea for understanding the relevant factors and prioritizing and connecting the relevant factors in terms of what is your intent.
Yeah, exactly. And helping out. It's like, imagine it will be an app that would assist you, that will tell you, okay, this is a good connection. Base your decision on that, or don't be. Now, app is a dangerous thing because somebody can hack the app, and if it falls into the wrong hands, it may be bad. But anyways, modeling it and creating scientifically justified suggestions of how a certain system should evolve, that's the best we can do. So we model and then we make a suggestion.
We're moving from physics and into intent. And that the conscious intent of the conscious things have more impact on the physical world that we live in.
Well, that is absolutely true, but modeling consciousness is yet another issue that we've discussed few times, an important issue. And I'm trying to learn and understand how we can do that better, because that modeling consciousness may be an important, relevant information for modeling economic system and other.
This is my field as a cognitive scientist. Yeah. That's what I do.
So it's very important to also get things right when you model that. But the whole point now that the main point is that if we do have a framework, simple mathematical framework that allows you to model all of the above, then let's do it. One by one, model, check experimentally, model, check experimentally, and then that's all we can do.
Exactly.
That's the idea. Katya, go ahead.
I have to confess that I still don't understand this thing about modeling. How do you formalize things? For example, with this example with the family, okay, there are nodes, connections, but then what is the context? You model
decisions, right? And then decisions.
Yeah, and how do you formalize how can you express in formulas the tasks you are solving? I cannot.
So let's say your family decides where to go on vacation, right? And we have a choice of where to go. This is an agent family has to make this decision to go. Then it gets information, different nodes get information, different members of your family get information. And then they talk to each other, they exchange information. And we can model this process, and then we can, okay, now the decision was made, we're not going anywhere. We don't have money, whatever, right? Or the decision was made, we fly to Brazil. I don't know, I've never been to Brazil, but that would be probably a good place to go. And so you model it, you saw that there's, and you do this repeated experiments, many experiments, and you see, yes, it looks like this is the connection that you have in network, and it's a good model for how decisions are made. My daughter always listens to what my wife says, never listens to me, right? So I mean, that's the connection. And whatever I say, or maybe she doesn't. She just pretends that she doesn't listen to me. But the kids can be cruel. But anyways, and then you model it. Yes, in this case, you only have 5 people. It may be the hardest of things to model. Actually, we know in physics when you have a 5-body system or 3-body system, very hard to solve. However, when we go to the other limit, when the number of degrees of freedom becomes very large, all of a sudden things become simpler. So like, with 1, 2 molecules, we can do 3 very hard, 4, 5 impossible, 1 million, we are back in business. And so this is a hope here that once we go to this so-called thermodynamic limit, instead of calculating the positions and the individual responses of individual people, you just study coarse-grained statistical properties or spectral properties of the network. And that will tell you, and then you compare, okay, here's one country with one network, here's another country with another network. Why is this one better than that one? Well, look at its spectrum. The spectrum has scale invariance, and that spectrum doesn't have a scale invariance. And so we can have experimental check of a hypothesis of what things should look like on this thermodynamic limit where you have many degrees of freedom. Gary, go ahead.
But you also have to have some criteria which decisions were good. How do you understand that flying to Brazil, for example, was a good decision
in this example, you just know how this decision was made. So, maybe you would have been able to identify who made this decision. Actually, my wife. Turns out that everybody was irrelevant, right? So we could identify the relevant invariants. That's my wife, and I'm certainly irrelevant. And that is just a study of a system. You perform one experiment, and you identify one important aspect of this experiment. Then you do it for many theories, and it turns out that 75% of wives in Florida make up all the rules. Okay, well then that's your conclusion. Then you know who to approach when you want to sell your tickets to Brazil. You go to wives. I don't know. I mean, you can make, once you understand how the system works, you can make you can run different tests, and you can make different correct decisions. We are decision-making people, right? We are agents. Yes, Gary, go ahead.
Katya, you've asked this question twice, and it's a beautiful question. I would suggest we're at the level of philosophy now. You're trying to find a universal common denominator. So I'm not going to give you the answer that I've come to. I'm going to ask you another question that I think might lead you to the answer. Here's the question. What is the one verse of the universe? One verse. So what is the one verse of the universe? If you can answer that, if you know the intent of the universe, now you have the common denominator that will scale all the way up to the biggest thing we can know.
Yeah, learning.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's an
Bobby,
answer, but mine is different, but I thought.
right, whatever. I mean, this is a hypothesis, learning. Then you, from this hypothesis, you would derive anything.
For an educator, it would be learning, right?
Right, exactly.
For an economist, it might be money. For
Mhm.
Katya, it might be her family. But I say the universe has an intent. So I'm not going to give you my answer,
Right.
but I'm going to say it's worthwhile.
We had actually very many times, we had a few times philosophical discussions. So we'll come back to those discussions in the fall as well. So
I'm impressed with this group. Thank you so much for sharing.
it's been fun. It's been fun. Thank you, Gary, for coming. So hopefully you will join us in the
I shall.
fall as well. Bobby, I haven't seen you today, but
yeah, I just got here, unfortunately, so I missed a lot of the conversation. I'm sure you guys talked about some really interesting stuff. So if I mentioned something that's already been discussed, I apologize. I was going to say some really practical stuff, kind of based on what Katya was saying, but then Gary said something that was even like more exciting and part of how I feel too. And it is philosophical, but I would argue that there's no clear distinction between science and philosophy when we start getting to the limits of what we know. So I do think that reality is what philosophers have described as teleological, but there's some debate over that term and what it means, whether it implies anything that's above what's natural, like some sort of guiding force guiding the universe. And I don't think it does. I think you can have a purely mechanistic explanation of the evolution of the universe that is a teleological trajectory towards a state that's basically a maximally integrated computational state. So I see the universe as the neural network making all of these connections, but the way we see it, we see these levels of hierarchical organization. That is the emergence of single-celled organisms to multicellular life, to communities, to the biosphere as a whole, which the humans form something like a global brain on now. So I think, it's important to realize that this story of levels is true, and we're doing something computational on top of the biosphere, which is already a computational network. So there's this computation going on, but I believe that evolution proceeds through this series of attractors where you get these organized systems that inevitably emerge. And so it does seem like the universe could be said to have a goal. It has some sort of final state that it's moving towards, but it's purely mechanistic process where it's moving towards an attractor, basically a cosmic scale attractor. So I think out of that philosophy, you can talk about agents as having these goals, but the agents' goals are basically the goals of the universe as well. So there's not really like a distinction between agent and universe. But so when thinking about this, I was like, okay, how can we apply this to society? And I think we can do exactly what you're talking about. We can model things, then we can start to actually make predictions about what's best for society. And that was a controversial topic because, I mean, the one thing that we understood about living systems, chaotic systems, or cybernetic systems is you can't perfectly predict them based on the laws of classical mechanics. So it was interesting that you brought up the three-body problem, and that is a problem. But I think when we're predicting life, you're right. It's the collective nature of things that allows us, because we do that in physics too, or you guys do it. I'm not a physicist, I'm a cognitive scientist like Gary. So, but you can predict trajectories of inanimate objects. But when you get three, you can't do it because basically the equations don't allow for that. And you get chaotic phenomena, but then you have statistical mechanics. You can just look at collective and you see overall emergent patterns. But the thing is, a living organism and an inanimate thing act completely different. Philip Ball, a science journalist, has used this example. You throw a bird and a rock off a tower. You drop a bird and a rock. You can't predict, you can predict exactly the path of the rock, but you can't predict the bird. And that's a single classical scale object, but you can't predict it with Newtonian equations. But here's what I realized. So, some people like complexity science, Stuart Kauffman says, okay, you can't predict life at all. And he's just like, it's not like normal physics. And what I realized is that's true, but that you can actually predict some things. You can predict that the bird's not going to splat on the ground. But to predict the bird, you need an understanding of its genetics, of its accumulated knowledge, which occurred through evolution, of its environment. So I do think that we can model these things, but you need to model them in a different way. You can't just use mechanical equations. And then it gets trickier too, because, you know, you want to find the optimal model, and Vitaly, you've been talking about ways to do that. But I think Katya's point still stands. I don't think it's against, I don't think it takes away any of the validity of thinking it's a worthy effort. I think what it shows is that it's a problem that's not going to have a clear solution, and that we need to keep getting closer and closer to what that perfect solution is. But for example, Vitaly, you could do your analysis. You could have a decision that looks like it's right for the moment. But there's some long-term consequence that you're not taking that is an externality on the full system that might have a slow accumulation of negative effects, like the environment. You know, someone, if they have trash in their car, and then let's say someone's coming in their car and it's an important person, maybe their boss is coming in and they forgot to throw out the car's a mess. They might just throw it out the window because there's a personal advantage if they're going to pick that person up to getting the trash out really quickly. They're like, there's no immediate negative effect of littering. But if everybody took on that mentality, there would be an effect in society, and it would start to have an effect on you. So I don't think we can know for sure what is the optimal answer, but we can have just a guess based on past things and based on, you know, all the logic we make. But we might find out that Vitaly's plan actually had some sort of bad consequence down the line. And then we would have to figure that into the model. So it has to be a recursive process always. That's always updating the model. The only final thing I wanted to say about this is, but I think it's important, when you model people, we are modeling systems. That's how we map the world. So if you want to model me, I now have a model of Katya and Vitaly and everybody in here that I have an understanding of how you guys think. And when I make decisions, now I might do something today and go, oh, but was that optimal according to Vitaly's neural network theory? And then I'll go, maybe not, and then change my behavior. So
you're welcome.
So yeah. So if you want to model me, I think you have to model me as a community of agents. And this sounds like it makes things really complicated, but I think this is actually maybe the easiest way to try to predict what people will do in collectives, but maybe also as individuals. We know who everybody's connected to on Facebook. Somebody has that data. Facebook has that data. We also have engagement data. So we could look at that network of the top 20 people they interact with. We could create a neural network for that person and be like, they interact with Donald Trump mostly, or Bernie Sanders mostly, or Elon Musk. And then we could make some sort of weighting depending on those people's ideologies based on things that they've said in the past. And then we could go for any individual person based on the network we see. And it won't always be right, but we could calculate a percentage, like a probability distribution, that on any given current event, how would they, respond to it? Will they approve? Will they disapprove? And I think you can get almost arbitrarily close to what they would do if you have if you've built this network of the people they interact with, so you understand who they've modeled. But I do think that's what it will take, but we have to go there because you keep saying model. And then, Alexander was saying, but we don't know the right answer in advance. Like, you have all these variables you're putting into the model. But the biggest thing is, like you said, consciousness. We don't know how people are going to respond. We don't know how it's going to affect them emotionally. It might be a great idea, but it might have some sort of emotional effect that makes it not work. So we have to model agents as communities of agents themselves. And I think that's weird and kind of trippy, and it complicates things, but it might be what we need to do to actually start seeing like, oh yeah, we can actually kind of predict what people are going to do.
Well, let me simplify it for you. And a neural network, neuron, makes its decision to fire or not based on the neurons it's connected to. Okay, so in essence, it is actually this neuron has a model of other neurons, not even the model. actually depends on that. Okay, so this neural network theory already gives you that. Gary, I'll give you a word. Let me just finish, because Bobby said so many things, and I've been recording it, writing it down so that I can respond. So we can really try to simplify things before we complicate them. Now, but then one very important thing that you said, that once you consider many agents, this isn't like considering many molecules. And there is a one important difference. This thermodynamics is what I call learning thermodynamics. So the usual thermodynamics, entropy goes up, things becomes more and more chaotic, things like that happen. In the learning thermodynamics, there is entropy destruction due to learning. And so people become more correlated. You listen to me, we agree on something. Now our thoughts are not completely independent. So the entropy goes down and down. And when I say modeling it, we don't still have thermodynamically in thermodynamic limit of many agents. We still don't have to model each individual, but just the thermodynamic rules, the statistical mechanics of it will be different.
Yeah, so
the presence of these two types of variables.
I'm a big believer in that too, and that's pretty much what my book was on, and I'll send that to you. But
Good.
It was basically about non-equilibrium thermodynamics and the fact that it's kind of this law of large numbers type effect. When you get a lot of things, you get the canceling out of a lot
That's
of
the whole point.
uncertainty.
But it's a different cancellation here because of the trainable and non-trainable parameters. But yes, you're right.
Yes. So when you get to life, you get a different type of parameter that you're calling trainable parameter, and that's great. Basically, what I think makes that distinction is there's a localized memory structure, starting with genes and then with brains.
Yeah. And
so I agree with everything you're saying, and you see these phase transitions in low level systems. I mean, you see it with like the magnetization of iron and stuff. You see this actual effect of mutually interacting effects, like and that's what that's when you get a phase transition too. So, but and I agree that the information is in those other neurons. There's actually a pretty influential theory called the 1,000 Minds theory by Jeff Hawkins, who wrote a book called On Intelligence that was really influential. And he invented the Palm Pilot, and basically just made everybody realize the brain was just this predictive, like inference machine. But basically, he's arguing that every cortical column, so it's not every neuron, but maybe the same for every neuron, but at the level of some populations of neurons, they have copies of all of the neighboring cortical columns. So there's this massive redundancy that's almost like a blockchain too. And I think a blockchain is actually kind of an analogous structure to this.
Entropy destruction, Bobby, it's entropy destruction. You are no longer copying the same, you're copying the same information in different places. So
that's what I'm saying.
Basically, they're not independent degrees of freedom anymore. You're destroying entropy.
Yeah, so
that's what
so in that I explained learning is basically forming these statistical correlations through building up adaptations with the environment, and that's reducing Shannon entropy. So it's a reduction of uncertainty, and you can actually quantify this. It'd be really hard, but people have talked about it, like Terrence Deacon. But the only thing I want to say is, even though that's true, Vitaly, at this point, I think that information is more hidden to us than actually looking at a map of who the people follow, and that understanding the agents they follow and who they've modeled. There's an influential theory. I know you know Carl Friston. He's a friend too. And they have a theory called thinking through other minds. And the theory is that basically and that's really intelligence.
That's connections. I'm sorry, Bobby, but those are connections.
Yeah,
if I connect to you, this connection is a way for me model your mind, right? I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, it's all connections. But what I'm saying is the heuristic that we probably should use at this stage is to look at people as communities of agents and model them at that level. Just in purely you could look at the dynamics, I guess you're saying. But we're already trying to do this at the level of culture and society too. It's kind of the same thing.
We're not. I haven't seen a single weight matrix published in single economy journal.
No, I meant
a spectrum of connections.
Yeah. No, I meant when you're talking about doing it at the level of culture, you're kind of okay with what I'm doing, because we were already talking about, like, we got to test it out in society and see what people like and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think there's a benefit to thinking about people, like modeling them as communities of agents, and because the statistical, getting the collective thing that you're saying we can do it at the collective level because of this averaging out,
Yeah.
I think that's perfect too. And I think that's the strongest bet. But I do think that you can start to model people at the individual level based on if you know their influences, because you're getting a kind of a hidden
That's a
peek
different
at their
modeling. This is a
model.
psychological modeling. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. But ultimately they're the same thing. It's just
Yep.
looking at the same thing from different levels.
Right.
And that maybe we can understand people better than they understand themselves, because I think a lot of times they're behaving subconsciously. They don't even know where their decisions are coming from. But then you see who they follow, you get a peek at their model, and they're like,
That's
you're
right.
doing this
That's
because of
right.
this. So
Good.
that could
Gary,
be
you want
kind
to
of
go
a
ahead?
shortcut. Oh, and the collective things tell you what's going on at the moment. But if there's a new trend, like there's the beginning of a phase transition, like a paradigm shift, you won't see that in the collective until later. That would be something that would like surprise the model. So I think there needs to be some sort of individual level modeling.
No, actually, Katya asked about this. When the thermodynamic system undergoes phase transition, then you see a certain behavior. You see the power law distribution of fluctuations. So it will be like an early warning signal. The system is about to go through the phase transition, so you will be able to see those.
Like building up criticality, right? It's the beginning of that avalanche.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Gary, go ahead.
First, I might have found a home for me. Second, words are important. So I created a new word called artropy. It's the inverse of entropy.
Mm-hmm.
It's artful. Next, the mind bit, I believe, was discovered by Cajal, C-A-J-A-L, and he shared a Nobel Prize in medicine in 1906. He was the first to image the growth that occurred in the synapse and gave it the Spanish word for button, Bhutan.
Mm-hmm.
So my whole theory is about butonics. So I don't look at the neuron, because every neuron has about 1,000 Bhutan connection points. And these are not developed by DNA, they're grown based on experience. So artropy and Bhutan are two terms that I think can help this cognitive scientific discussion.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary. Okay, so we have one more big topic to discuss. And I know everybody's tired, but we always go over time. So I still want to talk about this, and especially because I think that education is very important for everything else, including economic growth, medicine, developing of new ideas, theories, what's not. And so to get educational, to create an educational system, a good educational system is a challenge. I know we're not going to be able to do this, but at least have a plan of what this ideal educational system should look like is important to discuss. So let's start with a question. So the first was, what would be the most effective educational system? And so here, my idea was coming from the neural network theory, but yet I think one has to distinguish between the required subjects that the student would teach. This is like corresponds to the genotype of an organism, something that you must learn in order for us to be able to communicate. There's some framework within which all ideas can be formulated and exchanged, some basic math, physics, languages, maybe neural network theory, whatever it is that it allows us to formulate. And then electives. And then I would think that the most efficient educational system, but every person can first learn the language, how to exchange ideas, like by learning those core or required courses, and then decide for himself, what is it that I'm most interested in? Do I want to, investigate biology or psychology or neuroscience or art? But once you have that language within which ideas can be exchanged. Remember, one of the motivations for me to start with this group was we have to build a unifying framework within which we can exchange ideas across different disciplines. And the hypothesis was that maybe neural network theory is such. So I think this can be brought to the level of education where you first are absolutely required to take those core courses and teach them one way or another, learn them one way or another, and this like genotype, and then the bending of your preferences or your environment where you grew up with, you choose elective courses, which is more like phenotype. And so you have one very slowly varying variables, and so those required courses would not change on the short time scales, would only change on the very long time scales. You know, mathematics doesn't change much over time scales of 100 years, and yet other theories may change more rapidly. So that was the idea about what this effective, and it is opposite to what we have now. In fact, everybody who went through schools knows that they're mostly required courses. You want to get a degree in physics, you have to take this, that, and there are very few electives that you can choose. And then most of the learning then actually happens outside of the university. Once you completed your university, then you say, okay, now I can learn anything I want, so I'll just learn everything. So that was the idea for this most effective educational system. I'll also want to, so let's see if there are any thoughts about how can we make, the current system doesn't work, period. I've been a professor in university for 10 years, and that just doesn't work. So any proposals here? Okay, let me go to the next questions. You cannot switch rapidly between one topic and another. I understand.
I mean, I can say a little something. It's tricky because this is one of those situations where when you try to put the theory into practice, you know, an idea that sounds good at the beginning might not, you know, it's.
But think about yourself, Bobby. What would you want your ideal your system? You are growing up. What would you want it to be ideally?
Okay. Yeah, okay. I'll tell you what I think a foundation could be, but just something that you said, I could mention like a potential problem that came to mind. I think I would love to see, you know, as soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, people should just be able to design their own thing.
Yeah.
And like, it could really increase diversity.
To a certain extent, you cannot completely design it, because then you will not be able to speak to me. You will not learn mathematics, and so we cannot exchange ideas. You will not learn English, we cannot talk. You will not learn the tools, so the language would be broken between us, so this wouldn't work. So there are bare minima for us to communicate, but then you should just be on your own.
So yeah, that's immediately what I thought, was that, you know, giving the standard thing forces people to have a common knowledge base where they can speak a common language. So there's some optimization between specialization and between standardization. But what if we're already at that optimal point because we've naturally found it? I'm not convinced that already, even though immediately I do want to go towards more specialization, because I've had a lot of friends, like, for example, right now, if you're philosophy and neuroscience, well, I guess I'm answering my own question, but if you're philosophy and neuroscience and AI, for example, you have a way greater chance of solving the problems of intelligence or conscious machines, like, than just being AI or just neuro. Like, we're at the point where like there's a big lack of knowledge for example, AI people working on these, you know, creating machines that are freaking us out, not really knowing philosophy of mind, not really knowing all the different.
Bobby, I will have to disappoint you. Those people don't have a knowledge of mathematics.
Yeah, so yeah, I know.
They don't have. They just learned how to copy and paste scripts that they obtain someplace on the internet to their own programs. The only ability they have is Googling, now ChatGPT.
And it's going to get worse
unfortunately, this actually shows that people can create products without understanding anything about the product, and that's the problem. If you do something without understanding anything, and actually this is not just for AI scientists. I don't just want to talk about data scientists. Most scientific disciplines, people are not equipped with the math tools that are necessary to conduct research in those disciplines. This was not required for them to obtain PhDs in many scientific fields. Okay, And so, and that is the big problem. And then you put together in one room a physicist and a biologist, and they cannot talk to each other because they just don't agree what science is. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's why that's the problem. That's kind of a problem where you do not have this large core program which everybody has to take to just acquire those necessary skills to communicate. Because we are entering the 21st century where there'll be a lot more interdisciplinary research than we used to. And without common language, how we can exchange ideas, not only this group, the civilization will not be able to make progress.
Oh, so here's an idea along those lines. So yeah, I think we can agree on that. We need to make it allow more, specialization and interdisciplinary
and then
programs.
the core subjects that everybody has to learn. It doesn't matter, you're a biologist or you're a philosopher. You just have to learn differential, calculus. Just must.
Yeah, the basics, the logic of it, even if you're not really,
logic.
Yeah.
Calculus.
So
basic physics, languages.
What about this? So this author Howard Bloom, is a friend of mine, and he do you know Howard?
No.
Yeah, so he's written a book called The Lucifer Principle and the God Problem, but basically, yeah, he has this concept of omnology, and he started this course. And the omnology, I think it kind of comes from the root word from omniscient, but he wants everyone, he thinks part of a basic curriculum should be that everyone knows a little bit about everything. So just to take what you said to like a more extreme, what if we made a course or an actual program of study where your major could be, you're one of these people who are basically kind of like a polymath, but you don't have to be a genius. Basically, you're well-versed in all of the basic sciences and the arts and humanities, and your job is to kind of be a bridge. So what if we could make that something that was actually,
but I think the bridge, to build the bridge, you need people to get knowledge of those core subjects. So like you cannot build those bridges. I mean, I tried, right? And it's impossible unless people on both sides acquire the same basic mathematical skills, the same basic math skills. Without this,
I think it needs,
possible.
The hard thing is like, it's hard to teach people that stuff when it's not something that's natural to them. So I think maybe you could have some sort of meta course where you're like teaching all of these things like, okay, we're going to focus on the first 2 weeks on the basics of physics, then biology, then psychology, then sociology. But I think what is needed might be a unifying narrative. I think that's what's missing.
Very good. So Bobby, now you come to my point. So maybe all this can be taught if we have a unified framework like neural networks. So you have a unified framework. Within this framework, you only learn the framework. Okay, you only learn how to code neural networks. That's all. Okay, it's a 2 weeks course. And then within this framework, you formulate ideas in mathematics, in physics, in biology, in psychology, in social sciences. Okay, now you have one common language within which all those subjects can be taught and understood. But again, I mean, I'm not imagining that this can be done easily with only one semester course, but something that people can include into can be included in the curriculum, and then if that's possible, then those people who went through this system will be well equipped to collaborate across different disciplines, and that's all we want. That's what you need in order for this network of connections to have scale invariance, global, etc., etc. Gary, raising your finger, and then Josh raising. I have 2 fingers. I see 2 fingers.
Okay. I'd like to offer a different point of view. From a cognitive science perspective, from the idea that these boutons between synapses are the mind bits, and the knowledge that most of your mind has been programmed into you by society. And what that means is statistically, each individual has a propensity to become something. So I created a meme, an educational meme called your career manifest destiny. And I basically teach people that all of us, because of our Bhutan structure, statistically have a probability that we're going to be most productive and happiest in this particular role in life. And it could be being an electrician, not knowing mathematics at all, not knowing philosophy at all, but your dad was an electrician and you started out as an electrician. In Massachusetts, they're paying electricians $150 an hour now. That's more than we pay college professors. Yeah. So this whole idea, the end point, knowing where you want to go. So get people to think about really what were you meant to be. Obviously, you were meant to be what you're currently doing.
But Gary, how is it going to benefit the society? Because if you are training yourself to
I can answer that. I can answer.
The question is, how would that benefit the society if you are doing something that potentially a robot can do in 5-10 years from now?
You have to take that into consideration, but that's why you want to be an electrician and not a programmer. The automation, is going to you have to adjust to that environment, and that will naturally be fit into your career manifest destiny. But the point I'm making is that if you get people to think about what they like doing, what they're good at doing, can they make money doing it, and have them begin to be educated towards that and use their mindset for that, becoming best at that, it benefits society because we have people doing, what they like to do and they're being paid for it and they're good at it, and there are plenty of roles. So your career manifest destiny, I think, has a lot to do with education from a future back perspective.
So I don't think, Gary, we disagree, because I'm also saying that has to be many elective courses. When I say elective courses, I don't mean it has to be.
I'm in.
I love it, Gary. I think that should be part of the curriculum, actually, like kind of thinking about your purpose. And it goes in with this teleological narrative. The reason I'm, linking it to that, because you did say earlier that you saw that the universe, you could be perceived as having this purpose. And I think we can talk about that in natural terms. Basically, it's basically the neural network forming, and the neural network can be seen as like the mind or the brain of the universe. And so if the universe is fundamentally purposeful and we're agents in it and we're sort of carrying out these computations, this process, then we have the same purpose. We're sort of channels or conduits. Yeah.
Right.
And it's interesting because the connectome of the brain and the connections between axons and dendrites and the terminal Bhutan, like all of those are higher level representations of the neural network that Vitaly is talking about on the bottom level.
Right.
And what I'm so happy about in this framework is that Vitaly doesn't say, oh, it's all these, everything is really at this microscopic level of nodes. You give the same sort of
there's emergence of similar
causal reality. There's an emergence, there's a causal reality to that higher level.
Yeah.
And that's because really, if you look at like integrated information theory, these new consciousness theories of neuroscience that are using integrated information theory and a lot of the language and physics even that you're using, you can see that when these, basically, if that's the story, then brains are kind of like clusters of these computational units that have formed larger clusters, but there's going to be causal powers associated with the system level of that structure. So it really are, the levels are real in a causal sense. There's like
there's criticality. There's criticality and the presence of all levels. There has to be.
There's a universe. There is a one verse. Then there are subverses.
Right.
Okay. And this is the neural net. This is where the neural network fits. Is it dynamically goes from the big. And when we do that, we're no longer warring. Putin is not starting a war, or Republicans aren't, creating, and Democrats are not creating. There's an opportunity for life more abundant for us all. So we've come to an epochal stage in humanity. In the connection of the internet is creating the opportunity for, it's like atomic technology. We can use it for good or ill, and we're learning how to use it for good. And that's part of what's occurring right here. The efficiency of what we're doing here is for good.
Well, Gary, very good. Let me just say that was the whole purpose of those meetings, is to create a system where we are just nodes, a super intelligent system where we are just nodes, creating some and generating some new and better ideas. And the point for us, the first step for that, as said, was to develop a language, common language. So we will not be able to collaborate, we will not be able to create new ideas because we all come from different backgrounds unless we developed that language. And so that was like the first step, which we are doing now.
But it's more than the nodes. It's the overlapping of the ideology of the nodes creates a wave. It creates a movement.
Right. Well, I mean, when I say node, I'm not referring to a primitive.
No. I know. I just want to emphasize particle wave. I just want to emphasize that the getting together like this and talking in a theoretical way, talking in a practical way, talking in a supportive way, talking in a civilized way. This is the future of humanity. It can happen in the internet. You're all in agreement with this. I'm in.
No, this was the whole purpose. What we didn't know whether this will actually happen. So we are trying to do a phase transition to create this super intelligent network that will be able to brainstorm and produce ideas. We are not there yet, but there is a chance, Gary, you're right, that this may happen.
Quick question. Are we close enough? You said you can see signs of a phase transition. If aliens are doing a network analysis on Earth right now, are there signs?
No, we're not even close. No, we're not there.
No.
We're getting there.
No. We are close. We are
a stage.
Vitaly, are we close to a phase?
What time scale? What time scale?
It's happening right now, gentlemen and women. It's happening in this meeting. That formulation is occurring right now. That'll be propagated out. In all of us. All of us.
The funny thing, the thing that blew my mind, it was like psychedelic when I came to this like paradigm, like through reading so much stuff, is that that's literally what's going on though. Like it's funny, but we are forming a collective mind, and from like a systems perspective, we're literally like forming connections that are causal connections the way our brain has connections, and we're able to solve problems, and we're doing this kind of trial and error kind of optimization thing right here. I'll wait to the end to say like one quick thing about the education I didn't mention, but I think it could be based on a foundation of epistemology, which is kind of the study of how do we know what we know. So you can kind of ask yourself, like, am I believing this theory for like, what are the other options? So there's a Bayesian method.
So let me answer the question of when I know for sure that a phase transition took place is when we'll start writing equations. Okay, so when we start writing equation and understanding each other's equations,
they're not really equations, they're causations.
No, I'm talking about real equations.
They're data structured. They're not. We've got to get you beyond the mathematics and into causal.
Okay, so whatever they are.
What about verbal models? What about starting with a verbal model?
We're writing them now. We're writing them right now.
We're not.
Yes, we are.
No.
Is it a verbal model?
We can do better than that.
Vitaly, don't you start with a logical verbal model?
You do. And that's why this is a first step was to start talking.
Your definition of a neural network is writing that model that is influencing us, that we're beginning to use and synergizing around.
Yes. So it's a necessary, but not. We'll get a lot more mathematical eventually. Trust me, because this is the only way to formulate ideas more precisely, that we can go actually and create models, check them, code them, and then say, okay, this works, this doesn't work. It will eventually get more mathematical.
I think it's more experiential. I think it's more data science.
For now. Okay.
No. And I think you just can't do the mathematics. You've got to do the intuition. You have to do the intent.
Yeah, intuition is very important, but without mathematics, there are no models.
What are you, Pythagoras?
I think those things map onto each other. So there's
I
a
agree.
course, there's
Okay,
a perfect
Okay,
correspondence.
all right. So
I
we can agree to disagree, and this is great to disagree, because we will
We're
agree
not
that we are
disagreeing.
useless.
We're
As
not
nodes,
disagreeing.
we should disagree. Okay, otherwise,
Yes,
if
we're
we
not
all agree,
disagreeing.
if we are agreeing, we're not learning anything, right?
But Vitaly, just to play devil's advocate, well, actually, no, this is a good point. You're saying we need to understand consciousness
Mhm.
to understand the math. So I think that's a good example of an
Oh, we need to
emergent.
understand everything. Did you see how many this is our 10th meeting.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay? And there are so
including
many, there are more
experience.
questions that we can answer. But Alexander, please stop us and tell us something.
Yeah,
smart.
you mentioned generating ideas as one of optimization goals. Let's say, and Richard Dawkins called it our meme, analogous to gene, meaning that the memes evolve. So did you consider also modeling ideas as whatever is produced
Alexander,
yeah.
this is exactly what I said. When I said that for the education part, I said there has to be a required set of classes that you would take. Those are like genes. This is your genotype type variable, something we all agreed and we will all share. Okay, we just agreed that 1 + 1 equals 2, unless it isn't, and then we work with the other hypothesis. We go over axioms or hypotheses, and we derive conclusions. Then we do testing. We use scientific methods. So all this is a set of required courses that everyone in the educational system would learn. And then, like Gary said, well, maybe you've learned it, but you're really more interested in doing art. Okay, well, you do art, and then we'll discuss with you the art you do, and then we'll learn something from it. It maybe inspire us for something else, and then we'll generate more and more ideas. So the ideas that we all agreed on, they go right into this core courses requirements. And the ideas that we're just brainstorming, they may or may not be correct. It is still electives. This is still something for us to experiment with.
Vitaly.
I'm asking about the different, maybe the idea itself as a subject of evolution, right? It's here somewhere.
Oh yeah. No, it's idea.
Born, then it evolves and maybe spreads and maybe captures the world or maybe dies out, right?
Right.
Did you think of modeling the idea as a neural network, or is something?
I would like to suggest, Vitaly, you use the word gene. You want to use the word meme. I'd like to suggest that we all look up the word meme. A meme is not a physically transferred piece of intelligence. It's a culturally transferred piece of intelligence. So what you're talking about is the creation of educational memes.
Right, but I put it in a quotation mark, so I'm okay. If I put a word in a quotation mark, it can mean anything, right?
No.
Just to answer, Alexander, to answer your question, I completely agree that really understanding what ideas are, how to model them is very important. And before we discussed it, it has to do with something with the phase transition. Like all of a sudden, network realizes that it is better to have some discontinuous new shape. Right, so it didn't before. It was kind of optimizing with one spectra, and then all of a sudden a phase transition took place. Now, actually, when that happens, it doesn't happen often. It usually doesn't happen. Usually, it's but then when it does happen, this is a new idea, and so and then like looking at it, studying the equilibrium around this new state, and figure out how we could have inspired this idea before. How can we like make the new ideas to be generated? This is exactly what this new educational system should actually. This is Luis, I'll give you a word. This answers one of the questions, like how do we really want educational system to be measured its effectiveness, right? So I mean, right now we have standardized tests where you basically memorize certain things, you answer, you get a good grade. I mean, this is useless. Then what we end up is having many people who all know the same things. They basically know, and ChatGPT does that. So I mean, there is no need to generate people who can just repeat their well-known knowledge. What we want people to have creativity, create those new ideas, to put them in the environment there where they generate those new ideas, where their neural networks create those phase transitions.
I think Alexander was. I think
mathematically, phase transition is change of spectrum.
Phase. It's a discontinuous change in the free energy, more precisely. But yes.
Okay.
So a spectrum is in physics. We usually don't deal with the matrices that go through phase transitions, and here we do. So it's more complicated mathematics. But yes, you're right.
I think you would have to model the memes too, like the meme transmission. I think it's huge because I think he was talking about in the context of education. But I think he was asking more generally, do we need to model memes?
Right.
And I think
Let me
that's
just
a massive
tell you,
part of
I
this
agree. I agree with that. But let me say one dangerous thing. Somebody said something, and may sound to you smart, and you start liking it and putting lots of likes, but it carries zero new idea. That's a bug in our learning system. So, you know, some famous person wrote something stupid, everybody starts liking, start talking about this. This is a bug. Okay, yes, it's funny. Okay, well, let's go with it. But this is not helping their system to produce new ideas. This is actually harming it. So we have to be careful with memes. But yes, if we equate memes to ideas, then yes, ideas is our goal. Original ideas, not the copy and paste ideas, original ideas.
If you take the meme, you know, not as the internet meme, I mean, that's a type of meme, but I would say that what we're trying to do here is spread the meme of the neural network theory, and that when a meme goes viral, that's a phase transition. That's
yeah, absolutely. But this meme is an idea. Okay, this meme is an idea of, yes, you can potentially describe all of the observable phenomena with neural networks. Now, it's either true or false. And both answers are great. If it's false, we come up with a new phenomenon which cannot. If it's true, we have a unified framework for developing new ideas. Louis, I'm sorry, you've been very politely waiting for your turn. Next time, just speak up, okay?
Oh, thank you very much. No, I've been listening because I wanted to listen more and understand the language and the ideas being proposed. I suppose I'd like to say two things. One is, today we've seen an example of why I insist that decision theory and political theory are the most fundamental and most urgent questions that need to be resolved. Because even if we agree that your concept of building models is the most fundamental thing, we still have to decide how to reconcile different models. Unless, yeah, we still have to do that because everybody's going to have a different model. So how do we reconcile those models?
But we use Louis, sorry, but we use the usual approach to different models, right? In physics, when you have two different models, the one that is shorter and more compact in description wins. So
and the one that's empirical.
Yeah, Occam's razor principle. Now, if you, so it's very easy to compare models. The problem is usually we do not have many models. In biology, I'll take you an example. Biology, there are not many models. There are many experimental results. There are lots of experimental data, but not many mathematical models that can explain the data. Okay, so the problem is with we don't have many models, and I think the same situation is in economics or in political science, right? So really, you have to, if you have two models and you can compare and see that one makes better precision than the other, and it's a shorter, more elegant, that's it. And then you choose. So
no, that's true. That's true. If there's empirical evidence for the superiority of one model over the other, that's, of course, that's the definitive answer. But
without empirical data, sorry, I'm very impolite, but without empirical data, it's not science. Sure, without experimental data, it's not science. And so that is absolutely necessary. Yes.
Okay, that's one thing. And the other thing is regarding education. Something that we haven't talked about is a very alarming, troubling paradox at the root of intelligence, especially human intelligence. Something that a mentor of mine brought to my attention when I was a teenager. And because he wrote and was very influential in his field, he was a psychologist at Harvard. He wrote that the more we try to improve education, the more we necessarily polarize as a species. And this is actually physical and mathematical in nature. And that's a problem because the more effective any theory of education you can devise, the faster you will actually polarize humans.
You mean
And this
it's
is
educated versus uneducated?
educated versus uneducated, exactly. But based on biology and based on genetics. You
Right,
actually polarize people more. The more
but
opportunities
that will
you
be
give.
true. But that will be true for any with any educational system.
Sure, exactly.
Yes. So I mean, I think
not any, because you can try to cap the most intelligent people and keep them from learning more. But the more opportunities you give to the most intelligent people, the further they will break away from the least intelligent people.
right. Yeah. So I think this is a very, very important point, but I think, again, we can get away from that problem with the scale invariance and say, let's create an educational system which is flexible. Yes, maybe you can only get few classes, few years of college, or 1 year of college, 2 years. It's up to you to decide how advanced your degree would be. And then yes, it would still be polarization for people who went through 20 years of college versus those who only went through 1 year of college. But I'm not sure I understand.
Well, let's take the example of the United States. For the
Right.
past 60 or 70 years, the government has devoted untold amounts of resources and money to making things more just and more fair for the country. 60, 70 years later, you have a country that is more polarized than it has ever been. Bill Gates went into this education problem with his untold billions of euros, and after 10 years or so, he gave up. He saw that it was impossible, precisely because of the things I say, because of the more you actually devote resources to education and make things fair, the worse the situation actually becomes. And it's a really troubling paradox. And it's important for any model of education, any model of political theory, any model of physics, if we care about human existence, has to come to terms with this reality. That's my contention.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Josh, you wanted to say something?
I agree. I agree with this. And the way I think about it is, like, I'm sure there's a neural way of saying this, but basically you don't learn unless you're frustrated. And so as we go into as we learn faster and faster, we can expect, what you call polarization, I see as a cultural side effect to learning, that eventually we'll reach a breaking point. And that breaking point will result in hopefully a positive phase transition, but it could also result in, the destruction of society. But, let's hope it doesn't go that far. But so I kind of see that as anything that's going to happen in like any learning system. So we can all decide to like not learn anything, which I don't even think could happen, or we can sort of expect these types of frustrations to ebb and wave through societies and learn to kind of deal with them. And culturally, the problem is we don't deal with it. We are a right or wrong type of society, black or white. We biologically, we know as human beings, we feel pain having to hold two competing ideas in our brain, causes our brain to release chemicals that makes us feel pain. And so that ultimately could explain this polarization stuff, and we need to deal with that cultural side effect. But like on the whole, systemically, it doesn't seem like something that we can avoid or that we should try to avoid. If you kind of generalize polarization, it seems like it's just more of people reaching individual equilibriums until a breaking point happens. And that breaking point is kind of what I look forward to, because that's when progress is made, so to say. But anyway, that's my kind of.
But maybe the problem is that those who are decided not to get educated are not motivated to get educated. If we put them in the environment and the condition where it is not possible for them not to get educated, like all of the uneducated jobs are taken by robots. So there is no choice for you but get education. You're stuck with it.
Another thing is,
the
other problem is education doesn't have the right, it doesn't sit properly in like our societal mindset. And one of those reasons why is it's something you do maybe once, or most of us do it once or twice when we're 18 to 22. I don't know about all of you guys, but that was the last period of my life I should have been trying to learn things about the universe, right? And that was when, you know, that maybe it's almost, you should be starting your education there and maybe ending it in your 60s or 70s. And
you should
today,
never end education. My point
right,
is
but
you should never end
right.
education. It should be non-stop progress, but you should always be motivated to learn more and more. The only reason you stop education because all of a sudden you start getting paid enough and you don't have to learn anything new. You know, you are, and that has to be broken. You have to. You have to be put in the environment and the conditions where not stop learning is just not efficient for you. So, okay, we have few speakers. Katya, go ahead. You're first.
I've got a question probably to Lewis. I got curious about this education paradox that you mentioned, but what is the implication of this? So the effective education creates some social risks. That's the idea. But then what can we do with that, or how we should act actually? Is there any idea?
That's a great question. I simply posited that problem as fundamental to any theory of education, any theory of any model that pretends to improve the human condition or the human lot, whether through economics, through education, has to confront that reality. That's a physical, biological, chemical reality that extends at every scale of physical reality, from quantum mechanics up through cosmology.
Mm-hmm.
The universe itself is continually expanding. And this is something that we see in human nature, in life, in societies. We're witnessing it in a very painful way in the US, in Europe, and everywhere around the world. If you happen to be born incredibly gifted and intelligent and ambitious in the poorest village of Africa, you're going to be recruited and found out very quickly by Microsoft or by any of the other big giants, and you're going to do very well. If you're born in the US with an 80 IQ or a 70 IQ, you're statistically at risk of ending up homeless. And this is going to get worse and worse and worse the more effective we are at educating people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem. That's a problem.
Gary, go ahead. You are.
Lewis,
And Bobby. Sorry, Bobby.
Lewis, I very much like your idea here. And what I'm thinking is that there's a useful purpose to bad. And the useful purpose to bad is to teach us what not to do. So if you try to formally eliminate all the bad out of a system, maybe you're taking the most important source of learning. So instead of trying to idealize education or propagate education or commonize education, maybe we should allow all the teachers to educate the way they want to teach, and there'll be some good and some bad, and we'll have a difference.
Gary, this is perfect because this is exactly what raising the temperature would mean. A learning system with a very low temperature where every teacher tells you the very same thing is not very efficient. And it will that all students will learn the same, will get stuck in some local minima. But what we really want, we want to have a diversity of different views, more entropy have to be pumped into the system. But there has to be a balance. You don't want to have too much entropy in the educational system. And I would still argue there has to be some core forces that can everybody agreed, and there are lots of entropy coming from electives. But I think this is a good point. Bobby?
Yeah, I think that the phenomenon that Lewis mentioned is a problem that we can solve. It's not something fundamental in the way other things are fundamental, but in a way it is. So I think basically building on like evolutionary epistemology of Karl Popper, there's kind of like a logical explanation that's too much for me to get to here, but you can kind of connect your theory of neural network stuff to a sort of like a theory of learning and epistemology that really goes together well. But so basically, the way I understand learning is that it's a trial and error process, and it's a Darwinian process. And that basically trial and error learning that we do through life because we don't know what's the right thing is going to be in advance. We have to try something. We usually try something that's just a little bit different than kind of what we were programmed to do genetically. So it's just a little variation on behavior. In the same way, when you create a copy of an organism, you get a variation on the genome. So we're trying different things out, and our neurons are forming synaptic connections when we do that. And there's a Darwinian process, just like the process you describe in the neural network papers, of the more stable structures remaining. And so it's called neural Darwinism at the level of brains. And I did see that you were an author on a paper of multi-level learning in biological evolution. So I think those two theories of yours can completely be integrated.
Right.
But so what I'm saying is there's this, basically you have all these agents, they're learning individually, but you need to have a certain threshold passed for it to become like the next emerging paradigm. And basically, when we have these ideas that are forming right here, there are other people in other groups, and I'm part of these groups, talking about similar things. And like, that's the beginning of it. And we'll start connecting as we start communicating, and then we'll form this larger group. And hopefully we'll keep these subgroups too, because it's good and robust and stable to have hierarchy.
You need hierarchy. You need big structures, small substructures, and so forth. Yes.
And I love that we're talking about this stuff, because there's so much political, and that Lewis is bringing, emphasizing that there's so much here that informs politics that people aren't seeing, because the old physics theories were reductionist theories. I don't know, you haven't really made this, you haven't emphasized this, Vitaly, but this theory of yours is radical, because a lot of people think the microphysical explanation, atoms, or whatever, like interacting according to fields, that we can get a full causal story based on that. Right. So it's really radical to talk about this and think about these mathematical principles applying at higher levels. So you have learning, and it's this error correction process. So what Josh said is true. If this problem that Lewis is talking about becomes too much of a problem, part of society will get left behind, and you'll kind of split into two superorganisms where you'll have two organized structures, and the one could potentially be so unstable that it's basically forced to, it's a phase transition. It can either collapse or it can move into a higher state of stability.
Yeah, Bobby, but that's very dangerous to have.
It's very, very dangerous.
No, two structures is very dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
One structure will necessarily go into war.
Exactly.
So we don't want to have two structures. We want it to have some hierarchy of structures.
And that's my point, is that in the past, it's happened that way, because that's what happens when you just leave it to its own. And someone could get the philosophy that, and we see people talk about this, it'll even out. We're going through these cycles of polarization and stuff, but we're forgetting that when we talk like that we're active agents in the system. So I think we can correct for that problem without allowing what Josh said could be the inevitable solution, that when nature kind of restores the balance. And I think it could just be based on a lack of understanding of how cognition works and intelligence. This is what I think that problem relates to, because I've been thinking about it a lot in different contexts, and people are writing about this in different ways. But intelligence is hierarchical.
Let me ask you a question. Why? But why not make them the system education more flexible, right? So if making a sharp educational system, here is university, you are either getting education or not get education. Have levels of educations, right? And then there'll be some people who, as I said, go take 1 year of college, 2 years, 3 years of college, and then there would not be a split. The split would still be there, but it will be more continuous one. There'll be subgroups of all possible levels of education, something like that, which is
I think we're figuring out what it needs to be, and I think that's the right path. There is a big question of how is that going to be judged by employers? Like, as soon as we say, our people that do traditional routes are going to be more attractive, or maybe no, I think it's going to be good overall, but yeah, I think there needs to be.
To judge assessment of a system, creativity. So you should not be judging people by the standardized scores, right? By creativity. You should put them, like give some creative problem to solve. Like you're hiring someone. So for example, like when I'm hiring people for my company, I don't care about where they got their education. I actually ask them real questions. math, physics, computer science. If they can give me real answers, then I know that they understand that stuff. It's easy to figure out whether they understand stuff or not.
All of that's a step in the right direction. I guess the point I was just making is for that to be attractive to people to want to do these non-traditional routes, there has to be a change in society at the same time where we tell employers, look, there's going to be this new thing. You can't judge people by the traditional standards. And if you do, you're going to miss a lot of smart people. So I think it's a worthy effort. So what I'm answering, I guess, is Lewis made a point that seems counter to your claim that this is a worthy effort because there's this problem that seems to be whenever you address education, you get this effect where it only helps the people who don't need the help. And then we get this increase in divide, which destabilizes the organism and which could cause this dangerous split that you're talking about.
Right.
And we're not even talking about political polarization, but this is obviously part of that too. But
they're correlated.
Polarization.
But they're correlated. Political polarization.
They're absolutely correlated to education. And it's a similar problem too, because when you get, you're still splitting the nation into two organisms that have two ideologies, which are basically the ideologies are kind of like genomes. They're two different strategies for survival in the world.
Exactly.
So
Gary wanted to say something.
Yeah, just quick. So my point was there's the automatic mind, which is our reflexive mind, which is our more primitive mind, and that serves us most of the time during the day. But then there's this higher mind associated with the prefrontal cortex that's responsible for executive control, and it monitors our more automatic mind, and it's responsible for allowing us to adapt our behavior when we notice that we're not behaving optimally in regard to our goals. So an addict, a drug addict, this prefrontal cortex, this higher mind, basically that circuitry is no longer there. It's not healthy and they can't regulate. So they're just acting according to this lower pre-programmed mind. So what I think Lewis's effect is seeing is that this is not a problem that we can't solve. It's that when you provide opportunity to everybody as a whole, and you have these two different types of intelligences, the people with this kind of higher adaptive mind, with this cognitive control, they take those opportunities, but the people that don't have those abilities, when they're presented with the opportunities, because they're not flexible thinkers, they can't adapt to a new thinking style. And it was largely thought that IQ is fixed. And that was like what was taught in like psychology. I'm starting to think that it's not, but it seems that way because it's very hard to get these people who have these styles of thinking to change, and that successful people are people who are good at finding new algorithms for basically optimizing life. So I don't think that is a completely critical problem. I mean, an unsolvable problem. I think it's a problem because we don't have a nuanced understanding of the mind. I would call this a model of the mind is a multi-level controller. And once we understand that, we can go, okay, this problem is happening because we first need to teach people how to be adaptive thinkers and how to find new algorithms for solving problems. But it might not be that easy. We might have to create that cognitive flexibility and robustness, teach meditation exercises, attention training. There are other things that we need to do to create the type of thinker that we want that is completely left out of the educational system.
Bobby,
which could
we
also
are born this way. Bobby, I think we are born this way. We are born to be very flexible and creative thinkers. And it's only
but
when
don't
they
you think some are going to be better at that? And that's the person that he says.
No. But once they put in us an educational system where creativity is not, rewarded in any way, you stop being creative. It's no longer useful for your survival. And so actually we are trying to just eliminate the obstacle that was put there by hand. We just say, let people learn what they want, just learn the language of communication.
And the cultural sort of biases too, all that other stuff, because that's kind of constricting us too in what we feel we can accomplish. So that's maybe psychology needs to be taken into account to kind of—
psychology, absolutely. Yes. Okay, Gary, go ahead.
Lewis, we're applying cognitive science directly to politics here in Massachusetts. If you would like some information, send me an email on it. Or we might do a thing like this on the application of cognitive science to politics, because I agree with Lewis. Politics has run amok. especially in the United States and maybe around the world,
Mhm.
that the citizens, the responsibility for bad leaders is us. We're electing them, we're listening to them. So a cognitive scientific approach to the political process, I think, has potentiality. And Louis, if you're interested in seeing what we're doing, send me an email. I'll share some material with you. And if we want to do a session like this on, or we could also call it the neural network of politics.
Right. Well, we'll be taking a break from those meetings for the summer, and so anything else will come in the fall. But
Okay.
let's see if there are any other final comments on the education.
Gary, I put my email in the comments if you'd like to either send me yours or send me an email. I'd be happy to take a look at your material.
I'd love to know what you guys are doing too. I'm involved in a few projects that are similar with scientists and people who are not
Love to. Love to.
So,
This
so
is a
guys,
good
how about
group.
this? Since we all seem to be interested in this, Gary, if you have a Telegram, we have a Telegram group. The world as a neural network. Chat.
Send me an email. You have my email. Send me an email with the
Yeah.
link.
So if you can post something,
I will
there.
post it. I will post it there.
Perfect.
And
Okay,
I'll post the material.
any other final thoughts on the education? It's been the longest meeting so far, and it was a lot of fun. But I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Before we go on break, what can we do during this time? Because
Actually, yeah. Let me before we finish. This isn't break for me. This is just a break for you and for those who are lazy. For everybody else, it's not a break. The idea is for us to put together videos of the world as a neural network, what it tells us about different subjects, like psychology, biology, physics, economics, education, but to have not just a group-like discussion, but actual YouTube videos, professionally edited. So the procedure will be the following. We first get together in the smaller groups and discuss what should be discussed in these videos, let's say about economics, and we go over this, put together a script, and then record a video. So it will be a professional video with a better quality, something that we can actually share on YouTube and promote, because those videos, of course, they are very chaotic. We have chaotic discussions. And so if somebody is interested in that you should definitely join the chat on the Telegram, because we will be discussing that there. Gary, you wanted to say something? Yes.
My group has gotten cognitive science to the level that we're actually implementing it commercially in a lot of different verticals. So we're creating businesses because we like to do good, but we like to get paid for it also. So I would suggest that you take what we're doing here. You have to have the juice. That it has to have value. It just can't be theoretical. It has to be valuable to people to have the viral effect, the influence associated with it. So the videos are good, but for me, I'd do a video about a business opportunity, about a product, just an idea.
Sure. Okay. Anyways, guys, it was so much fun, and I do hope to see all of you back in the fall. Yes, and more. And we'll keep interacting over the Telegram, Facebook, or wherever you sign up. Thank you, guys.
Hey, Vitaly,
thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Just before you go, I just want to make sure. So if we're going to work on this, it can be coordinated. Everybody can still talk in the Telegram, and is everybody good?
So the idea is, first we go to Telegram, then once a week we'll just set a topic, and we'll create a small group where we will not be just have like casual discussions. We'll actually sit down and decide what should go in, what kind of pieces of information that we discuss.
Oh, so we might meet and talk about that too.
Yeah. But it's not going to be chaotic right now. It's not like everybody discussing their own ideas. No, we sit down and say, okay, we need to create a video for people who are interested in biology to understand what the heck we're talking about.
Is the video person that you have writing the script? Are we going to write the script?
We are writing the script.
Who's going to speak in the videos?
I will speak in the videos.
Okay.
Okay. So
Is there, you can do animation, you can do like,
Okay.
there will be animation. There will be animation. So we have a person who is going to do video editing. There'll be a person who does, all this fancy graphics and stuff, right? But again, this will all be based on the things we already discussed. Okay, maybe some new things, because we have like 10 meetings.
yeah.
We've talked probably about everything at some point, right? But for a person who is interested to quickly learn what we are talking, what we say about biology, it's impossible to find, right? And so we'll create a short video for that person. I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes at most, right? Just discussing, okay, here's what we think the neural network theory tells us about biology or psychology. So something like that, something short and a higher quality videos.
Well, I'll just quickly suggest this before you go, since it's our last meeting. I think you should make a Substack, which is like a blog that I mentioned before. To Gary's point, you can get subscribers through this. You can embed the YouTube video in the Substack, and then you can take the script and we can have it in text. So some people don't want to watch videos.
It will be in text, but the one point, Bobby and Gary, I do not want this to go viral.
You don't want it to go
That's not the
viral?
point.
You want to suppress the phase transition?
No, that because if it goes viral, I already had very hard time to shutting up people who came here and told random things. Already had hard time doing that. Okay, so if it goes viral and on fall we come together and get random people who are trying to promote whatever their products.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about vertical.
Right. So I really need to be precise.
Vertical incorporations that where people are contributing and making money, commercializing.
Yeah, I don't want to make money.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, I think making money at the beginning, that's not, but building a subscriber list, I think you.
I look.
How are you going to change things? How are you going to implement these things if you're not going to go viral? I think there's a way to go viral, but to have some.
I'll tell you how, Bobby. We are going to be talking science. Okay, we're not going to be just throwing our hands. I may write down equations.
So that's why we're safe. That's why we're safe. As long as it's valid science, I think we can promote the hell out of it and try to spread. I think we have a responsibility really to.
Okay, so Bobby, let me just tell you one problem I have with all scientific popular discussions that I saw on YouTube. Okay, all of them. There is little science there. This is more like I'm the boss, I'll tell you how things work, and here is, I'm not going to show you any equations or anything. So it doesn't, it sounds like a cult. The last thing I want to have a cult here, okay?
Yeah, my problem is there's little science and very little practical application.
Well, that's what you think, right? So I think it is very scientific. There is a lot of equations. I already wrote a handful of papers on this subject. What I haven't done is I haven't pushed it, physics, biology, I haven't pushed it all the way to psychology and other branches. But we are talking about science. We are not talking about just hand waving, because hand waving others people.
Good science is practical. Good science helps.
Gary,
people.
It's super practical. So I have a Substack called Road to Omega, which is kind of trying to turn this into something that is practical for individual psychology and for society and for politics. So I've already kind of turned that into something that Vitaly's idea is just waiting to sit inside. And it's not just my idea. My book was, I'm a journalist too, and a scientist. So it's not my idea. It's a synthesis of an emerging paradigm. But to promote my book, I went on like the Joe Rogan podcast, Michael Shermer, the Joe Rogan video. There's a 10-minute clip called "Is the Universe Becoming Conscious?" And I talk about a lot of things that we talk about in here. It has 2 million views. And if you read the comments, there's like 30,000 comments. People are super excited about this. Not everybody's going to be a scientist. There's a real hunger for this. And I think it has practical solutions.
And I want to make everybody a scientist. That's what
so we gotta blow it up.
I disagree.
The timing is right. The timing
I'm going to blow it up with or without you. I have an article, Big Think is publishing an article. Vitaly read it. It's on the neural network theory. I'm going to try to make this massive with or without you.
Which message?
There's plenty of need for all of us.
Right.
I think we can do it in a way that basically it's very easy to like gain like a big following where you have all those people, but then you set up filters where basically not everybody can
Okay,
be
so
part of
let
the
me just tell
discussion.
one more thing. Maybe you will disagree with this. My real goal is not, again, for videos to go viral or for this to get many hits on YouTube, is to create a group, a network of smart people who can generate new ideas. I want to go over this phase transition. Okay, think about this as a virtual institute where people would have a common language, common tools, and will be able to brainstorm and generate new ideas. So this is a bit different. Yes, we can of course make videos that everybody will watch and like, but that's not what I want. I really want people to be connected, people to be smart, and like
Total agreement. Total agreement.
I just think
My website is CogSci 101.
Right.
I teach cognitive science 101 online. That's my website. I'm in total agreement with you.
Vitaly, the reason I care about the message becoming popular is because what I see is a bunch of people pushing similar theories that aren't right because they're not seeing the big picture. And to me, it's borderline misinformation. They don't know they're doing it, but I could name famous people with theories of everything. And I think that trying to spread the message is like basically like just
and those famous people created cults. I don't want a cult.
So what is it going to do if no one ever? How can we get the message to the people that don't know about this stuff?
Bobby is not talking about a
okay, so very well. So we'll put a scientific videos with the references, with the equations, with the papers where people who want to study will study.
Yes.
Okay? And who don't want to study, okay. I mean, it's up to you. If you
this is what we're talking about is actually the concept of a neural network. It has many layers, has many scales.
That's what I'm saying, because there'll be many videos, one for each scale.
Well, no. The practical application is a scale.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
The influential group done well is a scale.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what we're talking about here.
Right.
This is an epochal idea.
Right.
Humanity is now beginning to understand what it means to be human. Okay. And
superhuman.
And you can't, and you're not going to be able to control it, Vitaly. I'm just going to say that ahead of time, because if there's a niche that's being created by the wrong theories that this theory is basically needed, what I'm saying is this is a process of hierarchical emergence, and that in this point in culture, this is the next inevitable phase transition because it's a learning process. We're going to come to this neural network theory as a whole.
Right.
So it just depends on how, but if you say, if your logic behind that is it's dangerous to grow too fast,
yes.
then I understand.
Yes.
But you can't stop the phase transition.
No. I'm saying it's dangerous to grow it has to be organic growth. That's my point. It has to be organic growth.
No, it can be exponential. And it might, think of it like this: Industrial Revolution. This is a conscious revolution.
Well, it is.
It's occurring at this point in time.
But you can kill yourself by going too fast. So we want exponential growth, but you grow faster than you can keep up with the resources that growth needs.
No, it will definitely be exponential. It is definitely exponential, but exponential can be large or small. Okay, and if it's a small exponential, then it will be gradual growth. Smarter people will join in, and
because if it does grow too fast, it will. Certain people will say it's a cult. It could kill the idea.
Exactly.
Alone. So you got to do it safe. But what we do, I think, as a neural network, like applying the theory to how we approach it, we think about all the counterfactuals. What are all the things that can happen when we put this theory out? Okay, and then make judgments about how to go about it that way.
So if we really wanted to be scientific and grow, controllably, although exponentially, if we do it just the meetings we are conducting right now, this is a wrong way of doing it. I'll explain why. Because if you take a random person who will just connect to a random video that we recorded, they will listen to us and they will think we are crazy. They will not understand much about what we are discussing.
Their mindset.
Right? And that will be a problem. However, if we create a more scientific, mathematical videos with all their
more practical. more practical, speaks to them.
And also practical. No, practical. Science is all about practice. You know, you create a model. No, of course. What if you create this pathway from theory to practice and then put it in the video with all the references, with all the necessary equations, with supplementary material, then it becomes of value. Then a person who is not a crackpot will actually pay attention to this, listen to it, and try to learn the theory, and maybe joining.
We have to think more about integrity. We have to talk more about morality.
We did talk about morality twice.
Well, okay, yeah, and we talked about science 58 times.
Right.
For me, cognitive science points to integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't separate those two things. This gets back to the universe. The one verse becomes a common denominator of all of cognition. So I think we ought to have a whole section on what does it really mean. You know, when I talk about selfish, otherish, we-ish, you know, that's a moral statement that I'm making. And knowledge without morality is very dangerous.
Oh, I agree.
Okay.
That's why we have to take it carefully.
It's just been a pleasure. I will post information.
It was so much fun. Yes,
So
please tune in to the Telegram. Everybody has Telegram, right? So Telegram, and then search for the World as a Neural Network chat, and then you will get there.
Okay.
Because all of the discussions from now on for the summer will be there, and after the summer, once we are recharged, and everybody will have a great summer, of course, yes. And then after that, we'll all get back together and we'll generate something great. Yes, we all agree with that.
And make some money.
No, stop.
No money.
No, we're not.
Okay, I'm signing off. Thank you.
All right, see you.
Appreciate
Bye.
it.
All right.